Hi friends, this is the Be Real Babe podcast, a place where your average Canadian wolfpack come together to talk about life stresses, messes, and successes. A safe space where being yourself is the ultimate goal. Each week we will bring you new episodes sharing our opinions on a ton of different topics in hopes we can get a better understanding of ourselves, each other, and this crazy world we live in. We want to build a community where we can show up as ourselves, be real, and lay it all out there. By sharing our opinions and experiences, we hope to reach others who can relate so we can all help each other learn, grow, and heal. But please keep in mind, as a disclaimer, none of us here are professionals. No one is giving any advice. We are strictly speaking of our life experiences, our opinions, and for entertainment purposes only. Now, with that being said, it's time. So grab your drink, grab your joint, and let's jump right in. Welcome to the Be Real Babe podcast. If this is your first time here, thank you so much for stopping by the show today. We hope that you have a good time. And if you're a returning listener, watcher, supporter, thank you guys so much from the bottom of our hearts for coming back time and time again. For those that don't know me, my name is Brandy. I am the host of the show, and today, you guys, we are on episode 162, Being Real with Port Alberni Mamas. I'm so excited, you guys. This is, for one, my mom's first episode with me. I'm so excited after 162. I have finally convinced her to join us. I'm so excited, and we are also joined by her best friend, Stacy, and one of my childhood friends, Serena, and I'm so excited, you guys, because we are talking about kind of the concerns that parents have right now when it comes to the school curriculum, the push in media and entertainment, and the over-sexualization of kids, and just the complete disconnect and an inability to have discourse about this topic. So I'm very excited for you guys to listen to this amazing 2-hour episode discussing all of these topics. But before we get into this awesome episode, I just want to remind you, if you are watching on YouTube or Rumble, just to make sure to like and subscribe and turn on those notifications if you can. Comment for engagement, it helps us. And as well, if you are listening to us on Apple or Spotify, you can turn on notifications too. It pops up every single time we release a new episode. And on those platforms, you can also leave us a review. If you're feeling extra Christmassy and giving this season, we would love to hear from you. And finally, you can find us on social media on Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at the Be Real Babe podcast. You can reach out to us there. Let us know if you have any topics that you want to talk about, if you want to be on the show yourselves. We love to have guests. We love chatting with all of you, and we will never say no to an episode. So let's jump on to this next one. Thanks, guys, for listening, and we hope that you're enjoying season 6. All right, babes, it's time to get on to the show. And with me today in studio, I have 3 special guests joining me from my hometown. My mom, Lisa, Stacy, and Serena. Hey, babes, how's it going?
Hey.
Good. Thank you for coming on my show today, friends.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. I'm so excited. 3? I don't know if I've had 3 people at one time. You guys might be my first time that I've done that. So thank you for joining in a threesome or foursome, I guess. It's kind of weird with my mother on there. I apologize.
Yeah, that's okay. We're good.
So let's go around the room. If everyone can just quick give a hi, my name is, just so everyone knows who everyone is, and we'll get started on the topic.
All right.
Start with Mama.
Hi, my name is Stacy Johnston from Port Alberni. I'm Lisa Hagan, Brandy's mom from Port Alberni.
I'm Serena, also from Port Alberni.
So excited, Port Alberni family. But yeah, guys, talking about Sogi. So you guys know we did an episode on this, and we mentioned that you guys know Mom does research for us in the background. But these ladies have been far more involved than me. This subject is huge, you guys. Like, super huge. I think you can all relate. As soon as you heard about it, you jumped into it, and you're like, this is nuts. And when we did our first episode on it, we were like, we can't fit this into an hour. So I'm really glad and thankful that you guys are coming back to help us a second time kind of go into this a little bit deeper. So let's start with the basics of what is SOGI 1, 2, 3 baseline. Let's start from there.
Sure. I can start with that if you guys are okay with that. Yeah, so SOGI, I think, is the way most people say it. I've heard some people say SOGI as well. It doesn't probably matter, but it's SOGI and stands for sexual orientation and gender identity. And I believe it was developed in 2016, or at least released 2016. And the 1, 2, 3, which I recently found out about, I wasn't aware of what it meant until a couple months ago. But the 1 stands for policies, 2 stands for environments, and 3 stands for teaching. So those 3 things are sort of the main compartments of how SOGI is being implemented. So that's sort of a general overview.
Jen, thank you. And so let's start with maybe and go around kind of how did you guys find out about this? So Serena, since you're already going, how did you find out? Like, how did this come into your world?
Yeah, I was trying to remember, like, how did I first find out about this? I don't think there was like a moment where I first found out, because the whole idea of like lesbian or gays, transgendered people, that's kind of been around since I can remember. But the acronym itself, which I can't remember it all, but I think it's now 2SL LGBTQ, and there's some other ones. I think that started for me in my memory around, I want to say 2015, somewhere around there. I was taking a program at the Vancouver Island University, and they were talking about it a lot. And I was like, oh, okay. I was taking the Bachelor of Science of Nursing, and it came up throughout our program a lot. And I was like, okay, this must be like a big deal, because, suddenly, it's in my awareness everywhere in this program, and it's quite heavy. And at the time, I think the university in general was really taking that in, bringing it into its programs, and being a healthcare program sort of relevant through, the humanities, the social aspects, dealing with people. Yeah, so that's sort of how I remember learning about the acronym. But it wasn't really relevant in, like, I guess rainbows had started being painted like on sidewalks around the same time. Yeah, so it started appearing for me around that time, 2015, 2016, sort of.
Yeah. It's so interesting because we came from a time where like, and you guys obviously being a little bit older, you're at a different stage. But for me, I found as a kid and as a teenager, like that was something that was just something we all accepted. Like it wasn't taboo by the time we got to that teenager age. It wasn't very much questioned. Like, we had some people that came out, and it was just, at that time, the 90s, like it was super embraced, I feel like at that time. And I just, for me, and I understand the inclusion of it and needing to have safe spaces for those individuals that are, for sure. And I know you guys feel the exact same way. What I get, like, this is where think the confusion gets, is that because you say we don't want it necessarily, we're not sure how this is going to be in schools, taught in schools, all of a sudden you're against all of that, which I know none of you are. Because like you said, it has been around. It hasn't been a problem. There's no problems about being any sort of sexuality. It's more like, what is schooling, like back to the core of like, what is school for? Is it really for those social learnings, or is those social aspects should be stay at home with parents? So for yourself, Stacy, you've got grown kids, I believe, right? So they're not currently in school. So how did that stumble into your world with all of this?
I think it was 2014. I worked in a feminist organization with the Transition House for Battered Women, and I went to a workshop, and they were talking about how this woman was talking about how they were going to slowly bring in not pedophilia, they've changed the name to minor attracted persons, and designate that as a mental health disorder, because then you can't discriminate against that person. And she said to be careful, because they were trying very hard to glom onto the LGBT community.
Yeah.
And we just thought that there was no way. And she said that parents would never allow this to happen. But as working in the transition house, all of a sudden our funding went from the women of funding for women and children ministry, and then it moved to BC Housing. So then we were forced to allow trans women into the transition houses, and that was making the women fleeing abusive relationships
Comfortable.
feel very uncomfortable, but we were really silenced on that. So I had been watching just to see where that would start to come up. And then the SOGI was introduced into the school systems, and it was all like, I love inclusion. I want people to feel safe and appreciated. I don't want anybody to feel fearful or anything, or be abused or bullied at all. I'm completely against that. But what's I'm seeing is not what it was advertised as, and it's gone very different than what it was advertised as.
Totally. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
And I think one big part of it is just like, especially when the own groups don't call out their extremes and it's immediate, like, when you start bringing up those questions and then, you're labeled as, transphobic, homophobic, whatever name that makes them feel good. And you're just like, I'm actually just bringing up a valid concern based on my experiences and my thoughts of extremes, right? And I don't believe every single person in that community is a predator or a groomer or any of those things. I do not believe that. I know you guys don't either, right? However, there is also where there are some, and there are always going to be people that are bad people that have bad intentions that are also going to make a part of that movement or minority or whatever to kind of get away with some of their bad habits. And I think that's if we can't call those out, that's where there's some worry there. It's like, I'm not saying everybody is, I'm saying that there's some are. And if we can't speak about those ones that are, that's very dangerous because we need to have specific boundaries to make sure that everyone does feel safe. And that very specific situation that you're talking about, Stacey, where it's like, women are evading men that are abusing them, and it's not necessarily to say that trans woman doesn't deserve her own space. However, can we have their own spaces so that the women that are afraid, that are in the middle of their highest trauma, that they're not going to see past that. It's just, at that moment a man, and that makes me feel unsafe. It's not about the political aspect of it. It's, in your core, they're afraid, right? So there's just like crazy boundaries that are being pushed over for women spaces, where it's like, I'm not saying you shouldn't exist, but can we still keep this, and maybe let's make another space for you that's safe, so then that way everybody can be okay. Mom, what about for yourself? Because I'm clearly not in high school anymore. How did you stumble across all of this?
Quite honestly, for me, I've seen the progression going up through your brother and your cousins, and I was kind of appalled at some of the stuff that was going on back then that I found out later. Things like I had heard that they were talking about anal beads in sex class, which was, I was like, are you kidding me? Like, what the hell? So then the pandemic came and all this stuff starts coming up, and I just started researching it and trying to figure out what this was about, what was coming into school. And I was shocked.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I thought I was like, I'm up on things, but
you're a cool mom. You're a cool mom.
No, but I kind of keep my eyes open to things. I feel like I've tried to be open for things, and I realized I was not. I thought I knew what was going on because I had heard that they were even talking about the trend back then was so you would stay a virgin if you had anal sex. So the kids were like, that was the big trend back then. And I thought, oh my gosh. And I'm hearing all these things and I'm like, what is happening in the school? And I'm having a hard time believing it because I'm thinking there's no way that that's going to happen. Yep. Those things are happening because, there's adults around. They would never allow this. They would never let that happen. And then when you search it and you see what's going on, what actually they're allowing in schools, and actually what they're trying to actually cover up, and they're not even transparent about it. Like, you can't even have a conversation, you can't even ask questions about soji. That is a big red flag for me, and that was a big alarm for me. So then I just kept researching, and what I was finding, I was just, whoa, okay, there's a bigger plot.
Yeah,
there's a bigger thing here.
As soon as I do this, as soon as people start to get extremely emotionally triggered about asking questions to me since the pandemic, like you said, that is a number one flag of being like, and like, I don't want to spiral off into all the times that's happened over the last couple of years. But I feel like, it should have conversation. We all get questioned all the time about stuff. I think it's important that, especially if we've gone through stuff, and we've talked about this before, especially me and Mom, about like, if we look at our generation, we feel like we were hypersexualized, and that wasn't even in the schools of everyday conversation at that young age. That was like, we're in our teenage years and we're watching MTV and, all that kind of stuff. Like, what is it? And we see how that's affected us. what,
Yeah.
at a younger age, it's, I don't need to be a scientist or a therapist to know that that's probably not great, like, and I'm not saying that then that means that those sexualities shouldn't be talked about. I think it just needs to be in a specific space, and this isn't just
Not in
about like,
school.
pardon?
Age appropriate, maybe.
Not in school.
Yeah, but because yeah, like as a teenager, I don't think it's terrible, like sex education and reproduction. And I think there's a
Yeah.
time and space to have these conversations, and there should be therapists. But when we start restricting, like saying teachers have to say this, or, hide this from your parents, it's like those are the things that really stress me out a little bit, right? It's just kind of like, kids have feelings. If we continually validate them, where would this world be, kind of, you know what I mean? It's just a little bit, but I'm getting sidetracked. Okay, so
Yes, to
this,
bring it back. So
to bring it
when you're
back.
talking about what soji is or whatever, and that untransparency, when you sit here and they say, well, it's not a curriculum, it's not in the curriculum or whatever, but the fact of the matter is, it is actually in the resources. It's a resource tool, is what they're actually saying now, and
Okay.
it actually is ingrained in
The school.
every subject. Instead of saying it's a curriculum itself, it is put in. You will go to the website, Soji Education, and you can look up in that Soji Education. It'll show you, and it'll show you the plans, the school plans. If you look it up on Soji Education, it'll show you right there. It's all ingrained in the classes from kindergarten on. And so we're talking about learning pronouns and stuff in the kindergarten, and you're like talking about, like, you've got your pride flags and everything up in the school. Well, how can you tell me that it's not talking about what your sexual preference is? If a kid in grade 5 asks what that flag is, what is the answer? What is the answer to that? What is their answer to that?
Yeah.
It automatically goes to what your sexual preference is.
Yeah.
There's no way around it.
Yeah. Well,
why is that?
And that's where I get confused, because that's what I like. That's where I get confused of this, like the pride of your sexuality versus like the gender part, right? So it's like, okay, so if we're just saying it's not about sexuality, then it's about gender, then how does that connect with the pride flag? Because isn't pride about being proud of who you love, and love is love, right? And inclusion, which it is. But then it's like, okay, so maybe we're talking about two separate things here, like, the pride of who you love and that sexuality, and like the pride parades, the drags, like all of that. Can that just be like adult geared, right? Like that's where I think most people, let's say, that are coming from this side of like, let's keep it out of the schools, that's, in my opinion, what they're saying. If there's a child that is generally confused, to me, I think, because it's coming from all different areas, because I don't think these children, not all of them, there are children, I believe personally, that have gender dysphoria. But at the same time, I feel like if it's not being put in front of them, if they don't hear about it, if they don't know about it, it's not even a thought. So like when kids are that young, there's obviously going to be some confused, and they should have spaces to go and talk. But the minute you put it all out there, and like, as of course, of a kid, it's like, oh, you can be whoever you want to be, and that's great. But that can also be like super confusing, right? So I think it's just giving so much confusion to such little children, and to say that pride doesn't have sexuality to it is a little bit silly to me, because I thought that's what it was all about, is love is love. So I think there's like some separation there, but it's all being in one group. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like, when we're saying, oh, we have pronouns, it's like how they identify, that has nothing to do with sex, but it's all looped together. So is that maybe two separate things that we're then talking about, that
so if it isn't linked to sex, and it isn't linked to your gender and everything else, then why is it there?
That's what I mean, right? Like, that's like, if it, that's, I just think it's kind of different. But maybe that's what the trans flag is for. Maybe I'm just trying to understand it. I always try to play devil's advocate and try to understand, like, you're saying it's not sexual, but when I see that stuff, that's what I see. Maybe that's what my algorithm's showing me. So what is it then, like,
well, I try to put myself into a 6-year-old's little mind.
Yeah.
You put yourself in a 6-year-old's little mind, and you don't care about any of that stuff.
Yes.
If it's not there, it's not in your face, you don't care about that stuff. All you care about is what you're going to have for lunch today, or, maybe I'm not tying my shoes properly, or, all these other young, innocent things that go on with children, that they wouldn't even think about that. Why would they even think about whether I'm a girl or whether I'm a boy?
Mm-hmm.
They don't think about it.
No.
They just are. They're just beings. So to have that projected in there everywhere, Like, you know, in some schools, there's just pride flags everywhere, and everybody's talking about you are who you are. You know, you might be in the wrong body. Why is that even being brought up to kids that age? It makes absolutely no sense. And to me, I'm going to say that bad word. It's like starting to be a form of grooming. It to me, that's where it goes, because you're putting those thoughts over top of kids' heads that would never have thought about that before.
Well, and it's a bit contradictory too, because you've got somebody saying, "Love who you are, be happy with yourself," but maybe the doctor fucked up when he said you were a boy and you're actually a girl. So, like, what is that telling a child? You could be born in the wrong body when they're so little. Like, what a horrid thing to say to some young child, that they're not perfect how they are.
Yes.
Oh, you're wrong. There's something wrong with you. That, it to me personally, is an evil thing to do to such a beautiful young child. I find that hideous that people would do that and say that and read picture books to kids saying that over and over and over, that they
Born in the wrong body.
You're wrong.
Yeah. Instead of teaching them to, you know, embrace them, and maybe they go through all of that and they come out as an adult and maybe they are trans, and that's the journey that they get to take on their own, and as adults they get to make that informed decision, because it's a huge decision, right? And I think there's some people on one side of the argument, let's just say, that, you know, it's just like, we're not saying that people shouldn't exist and they shouldn't have those things, but all of this starts somewhere and it keeps growing, right? So if we start talking about this now and we're seeing all these children transition and people are arguing saying it's not happening, it is 100% happening, right? So it's like, it starts here. And there's a difference to me about teaching inclusion than, like you said, Cece, like telling a child that there's something wrong with them. I'm not sure at what world, like if a child came to us with anxiety or depression, would you turn around and be like, you were put in the wrong body?
No.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, so how is this then the only form of, let's say, because it is, gender dysphoria is a mental illness. How is it then with this specific mental illness, it's then, no, you're born in the wrong body, affirm. But then on this side, when there's all these other mental illnesses, it's like we try to help them, you know, bring them back to center. Does that make sense? I find this one kind of be a strange one, where it's like mental illness is so hated on, but over here it's glorified and we see the attention, and are people socially going to that construct to have that support and that, you know, the likes and the, I'm not saying all of them, but you kind of have to wonder, right, that are kids that influential, that they're seeing the positive that they're getting and they feel left out, and once you do this you're going to be included, and then they don't feel included, is what I'm hearing from detransitioners, right? So it's like it all starts here, right? Because these kids wouldn't know about these words if it's not in their outside lives, right? Like, I think
Exactly.
little girls wouldn't have thought that they were fat and ugly, you know, at 6 years old, if there wasn't someone else in their lives saying that about themselves, or if they're exposed to stuff like that, right? Children don't just get body dysmorphia by being children. It's because they're mimicking patterns from people around them. So I think this is the same kind of thing, where it's like kids are confused and they see this and it's happy and it's rainbows and it's good and it's, you know, like it shouldn't be necessarily a bad thing. But again, what is school for?
And if you have a child that's anorexic or bulimic, you don't go, hey, here's diet pills.
Yes.
Here, we'll give you a stomach bypass surgery.
Yeah. We're affirming that you need to be skinnier.
Yeah, you don't start talking about how they need to be skinnier all the way through, so that later on, when they are an adult, that they can go get their stomach stapled.
Yes.
Or whatever they're gonna do. It makes absolutely no sense to me.
Yes.
It's insane. The DSM-5, which is, do you guys know about that? The Diagnostics and Statistics Manual, version 5. That's where like all of our psychiatric kind of conditions diagnoses are defined, and I think the treatment and everything is in there as well for each condition. Well, they amended it somewhat recently. I want to say in the 2010s. I can't remember the exact year it was, but they amended it used to be sexual identity dysphoria, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, and they changed it to gender dysphoria. And with that, they changed the treatment as well. So the problem is no longer that you identify as something else; it's that you're not happy with the gender. Like your dysphoria is on the inside with the gender that you are, and the solution isn't to like realign you with your born body, your physical anatomy, and to guide you in that way. It's more to take away the dysphoria, but but your sense of what the gender is validated. So instead of saying, you know, you were born a female, your sex, but you identify as a male, and that's your gender dysphoria. Instead of saying, well, you were born a girl, and let's try and figure out let's try and get to the bottom of this. Why are you feeling this way? What can we do, you know, to support you and to fix this disconnect, right? Or this perspective of disconnect, instead of saying, well, and I can't speak for everyone, but from what I'm gathering from my research and just looking online at how long someone has to wait to get the hormone therapies, like the puberty blockers, they're changing all that to less time and less requirements. So it's appearing that the support is more on the treatment to change your gender, to get rid of your dysphoria, get rid of your anxiety and your depression that's associated with your idea, instead of fixing the idea. So it's like treat the anxiety with the depression and the gender with all these chemical concoctions. You know, the puberty blockers is what you start off with, and there's a certain amount of time you have to be on that. But yeah, so my understanding is that's how they're sort of looking at this diagnosis, instead of saying, you know, here's all these holistic ways we can support you and maybe connect you with other ideas and other people. It's just right away now you can pretty much go and start. I'm going to call it immediately. I don't have the exact timeline in front of me, but when I read it, I was like, what? And you used to have to need several letters from several like doctors, and they've reduced that down to one. So you only need one letter of support. I have this all laid out somewhere. I wish I had it in front of me here, but yeah. So they've basically cut the criteria in half.
Yeah, and change what the care is, right? Like I said, when did that happen? Change where it's like, and I'm not saying that everybody person one, but even if you listen to the OGs trans, you know, like the Buck Angels, the Blair Whites, all of those individuals, they're all against that because for so many just medical reasons, right? And it's like, why are kids talking about being in the wrong body? Not like none of this would, well, TikTok, I feel like is a big reason, but besides that, you know, it starts at school too, right? And so it's not to say that as they grow up, if this is something that happens to them, they can have that conversation with their parents and stuff. It's like, it's introduced at grade 5, I think it is. We said kindergarten. Was it kindergarten grade? You're 5, 6 years old. You know, like kids shouldn't even be having these conversations about it because, you know, they should just be figuring out the fundamentals of just being a functioning person and, you know, flowing through. And if you need to go home and you have those things, I understand that not every home is safe, but I'm just not sure. Sometimes I get confused where it's like, sometimes they say teachers can't do anything because of they're held back. And then the other part where it's like, don't go to your parents and only go to your teachers. You know, there's this like weird thing where it's like teachers can't do some things, but then all of a sudden they can now affirm your gender for you and hide that from your parents.
And they can like introduce like lessons. Like that's the problem. There's no restriction. Where is the level of how do you know that somebody's not going to be using these resources in a very wrong time in a kid's life and a kid's age, because there's no restriction on teachers to do that. Who's overseeing that? You're not even allowed to go and ask about it. And my other point is in all of this, it doesn't matter if it's what it is. Why are they not teaching positive body stuff? Why are they not teaching how to love yourself? Because and even with the bullying stuff, if you start teaching from a very, very young age of how to love yourself and love people around you and get a strong foundation of that, none of that stuff matters. None of that stuff matters. If some kid's going to come up and bully you, if you have a strong core foundation of who you are and that you love yourself, that's just going to flip off like Teflon. So why is that not being taught? Why are we teaching pronouns instead? Like you said, why are you doing the how you fix it instead of how to grow it properly? Like that's what I don't understand. It makes me sick.
And then you've got a Tavistock Institute from the UK, which was a gender institute that they found, because there were so many, I think they were being sued by previous children that had been transitioned without, like, informed consent, there was none. And they found from their going back on their data that 97, I think, percent of those children they were either autistic or they had some other mental health issues, sometimes up to 5 that were not looked into before they decided to permanently sterilize those children.
Yep. And you hear that a lot, unfortunately. And I'm really glad that there are more and more coming out. And that's why people get so upset that you say stuff, because, you know, there's always going to be those tragic stories of people that did get hurt, that did get abused, that weren't able to be who they are. And I think that is so fucking sad, and that's awful. Yeah. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that every single kid is doing that. And there is big consequences. You know, I don't just speak out to the beauty industry just for women. I do that as well, because all these kids that are in the wrong body, especially if they are male to female transition, the amount of beauty products, the amount of surgeries that they have to do, the amount of things that they have to do on a daily basis, exactly. It's just, I mean this in the kindest way, between medical treatment and beauty treatment, it's just a huge cash cow. And you're going to have to do that for the rest of your life. So if I'm sitting here screaming for women about beauty products that are killing them, Botox, fillers, like plastic surgery, same fucking thing for trans women as well, and men too, right? Like, and because that industry too, they're telling you, oh, like, you need to show up like this to be accepted, you know? So it's just like, it's just this wild mind fuck from all different angles, you know, and getting onto the puberty blockers things, like, that is such a permanent bad thing, like 10 times more than birth control. And look what birth control did to a giant population, right? And
Leukeron is a castrating drug.
yes, it is. Yes.
For
I know,
pedophiles.
it's exactly right. Like, it's 10 times worse, but like, that's what I'm saying. Look at birth control. It's been so normalized, and look at how much danger it does. Are we on that same path here to normalize these things that are super destructive down the road, right? Like, most of us thought birth control was great. Now most of us are aged and we're like, not great. Not great at all, you know? And so it's like, how come we can't call that out and say, hey, fucking with hormones at a young age, not great, right? And it's like, yeah, how do we get to all of this back to the schools? Because this is where the conversation starts. If a kid comes home and says, hey, I think I'm in the wrong gender, then all of a sudden you're going to be talking about all of these things. And that's why it's important to understand, why is this in schools, right? Because if that's not in their everyday lives, it's probably not going to be a conversation.
Well, that's another thing too. I feel like that's bleeding off of, like, so if you have mental health issues, if you have mental illness, if you have depression, you have all these things, the system cannot handle all the rates of the kids that are coming up with these mental illnesses. The society around, the internet that was introduced to children, all of these things that they're watching, that they feel like they have to get to in order to be normal, in order to be, you wonder why they're confused. Parents are confused. Parents are confused about half of this stuff. And I feel like this political stuff, which I feel like it is being put on our kids to deal with, because we can't deal with it. And that makes me so pissed off. Like, we're adults and we can't deal with it. It's time for adults to stand up and start dealing with this stuff, because it's not fair for our kids to be doing this political arena in a school system. It should not happen. Their lives should just be about living life and being happy, and not having those constructs
Pressures.
in the school system. It infuriates the crap on me. But what I started to say is that the mental health supports, they say they're out there, but they're actually not. Anybody that tries to get their kid in to do anything, it doesn't happen. The supports aren't there. Financially, they're not there. So now it's left to the teachers to do. Is this the teacher's job? Like, I'm sorry, but I feel sorry for a teacher.
I do too.
Like, I do. I get frustrated with teachers that are not standing up and saying, okay, this is crazy. And I know that there's a lot of teachers that are just like, I don't want to put this in my classroom. But I don't know the statistics of it. I haven't talked to a lot of them, because you're actually not allowed. They're actually afraid of you, because they think that you hate LGBT and all that kind of stuff. They listen to the mainstream media and all the clicks, or all the sound bites, or the Teachers Federation or the QP or whatever lying stuff that they're listening to. But since when did they become psychologists? Since when have they have now become parents?
Yes.
They've had to become parents. They've had to become mental health workers. This is too much for a teacher.
100%.
And they don't have degrees for this.
Nor should they have to.
And they shouldn't have to. Like, I would hate to be a teacher. People sit here, teachers get paid too much.
No,
Do they?
They don't.
They actually don't, because of the things that they have to deal with, for one. But I get really mad and for the teachers that they have had this put on them. And I don't even know if they're allowed to talk with each other about it. I hear things that they're not allowed to. It puts them in a very bad position when, parents come to talk. They'd be like, no, that's not in our school. That's not in our school. Well, even if they said that, how do you know that that's the truth? Because they're not allowed to tell you. And if they're not allowed to tell you, what does that tell you? Does that not bring some huge red flags to you right there? To me, it does.
Well, what would that do to a child where the teacher will be like, hey, I'll lie to your parents for you? Like, that is insane, to let people know that they would have that much power to. And then what does that say about their parents? Oh, my parents can't be trusted if the teachers are suggesting that maybe they shouldn't know this stuff about me. That is like destroying the family. That is pitting children against their parents and their authority. And who cares the most about their children? It's the parents. It's not the teachers. Not that they don't care about their students or children. But when it comes down to it, parents are the number one people that are going to make sure that their children are okay and safe, and to keep the possibility that they have a mental health issue a secret from the parents is
criminal.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the progression of it too, right? Like here in BC, and speak specifically, children could go get vaccinated without their parents' approval. I was 16 years old. I did not have approval. Like, I'm sure my mom obviously approved me of being on birth control, but I didn't need you. I went to the gyro there. Went to the seedy little down there. It smelled bad, and you just got birth control right away. There was like a handful of questions and out the door. And I agree with you, Mom, specifically too, when we're saying there's no help for mental health. Like, there isn't. Like, I don't care what anybody says, there is not. And there's no understanding too of like basic knowledge. Like, I didn't know that. I know a lot of people didn't know like basics of like eating properly and your gut being your second brain. Like, to me, all of those things that set you up to being a basic adult should be what's taught in schools and stuff like that. But instead we're taught, you're in the wrong body now. There's all the different pronouns. Like, we're getting so far away from the fundamentals of just being an everyday living human being. And everything is just so much social justice and politically driven now in schools. Like, and I think that's why, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, is like the other alternatives. I remember homeschooling used to be made fun of, and now it's like, that's what everybody's wanting to go through, because you, like you said, you just assume that your kids are being taken care of and they're learning all the things. But I'm hearing that nowadays, like, you don't even need to fully pass tests. You don't have to do things like to just pass grades. It's pretty much just passing kids over, next grade. And I just feel like from where school started to where it is now is completely different. And so people are wanting to go back to the roots of like, I just want to teach kids how to cook. What is basic biology? What is basic, like outside nature, whatever, languages, people, compassion, going to the grocery store and teaching kids how to coupon and do the math and ask for things, those are the beautiful things that you can do in homeschool that is just not happening now. But I think too, you guys can agree, there's that big push to break the family up where it's like parents can't afford that now because both parents have to be working. They can't, unless one's away working, or, it's so sad because it's like they're pushing all these parents into these corners where they have to drop their kids off at school. They have to do these things. They all have to be working. And it just makes me so sad because you want to trust that you're dropping your kids off for 8 hours a day and they're learning the things that we learned in school and being held to the standards that we did. You got to, did you learn this? You needed to work on it. Now it's like, oh, you didn't? Okay, well, on to the next. Like, how is that a service for a child? Like, how is that setting them up for success? We're getting another fucking trophy microwave generation where I want something right now and I want it for doing nothing and just existing. And I just don't think that helps to a contributing society to move forward. I feel like
even when I went into the school for my kids, to try and as a parent figure out how to help my child get through some of the things, some of the obstacles that they had,
Mhm.
and continually did that.
You did.
Um, got looked at like I was this crazy lady,
Mhm.
this crazy lady that was like over
Mhm.
controlling for their kids or whatever, and made kind of felt shameful for
Mhm.
even trying to inquire about this kind of stuff. It's just like, whatever, whatever, like, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. It's like, no, I'm trying to take an active role in my child's life, and they're making you look like you're an idiot and making you feel like an idiot, so then you turn around and you walk away and you don't have nothing to do with it because
Mhm.
you feel shameful about
Mhm.
caring about your kids.
Mhm.
That's a huge disconnect.
Very
And that
huge.
was a big red flag for me too. I was like, what in the heck? Like, it wouldn't you want me to help you,
Yeah.
to
And
help
like
this
if you want to help
child get
this
through
child,
school?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely. Yeah.
it didn't make any sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Like, and now the same thing. Parents are going up and they're trying to get involved in their kids' life or find out what's going on in their classroom, and they're turning them around. They're not letting them know.
And that
They're
that
not
worries me.
telling them.
And that's worries me. It's like I've heard that there is kids that have gotten like medication for depression under the age of 18 without their parents understanding. Like a kid was taking it for like a whole year and dad had no idea. It's like,
That's,
how
yeah,
is that not then a flag? And that's what I mean. So why isn't that a flag to tell parents, hey, your kid's coming to me and asking for depression medication? Like if you truly care about that child, wouldn't you go to them? And they're like, oh, well, some parents aren't safe. Well, the unsafe parents are probably not going to show up. I'm sorry not to be that way, but like, and even if they take it or not, isn't that your duty to maybe bring that up? And it's like, oh no, you can't say anything. It's like, okay, how?
That's because, sorry,
No, no, go
because of
ahead.
the BC Infants Act.
Hmm. Yes.
12 or what they consider a mature minor, they can make their own decisions. So my daughter was in school 10 or so years ago, and I signed that she could not get the Gardasil vaccine
Mhm.
because she'd had a previous uh, like adverse reaction, and I'd looked up the ingredients. I didn't know which one was it, so I said no, she wasn't having it, and I just did some research on it, and
So smart.
it wasn't right. So I signed the consent form that she was not to have it. And so they showed up at her class. They were giving everybody their shots. She was the only one that didn't have it, and they harassed and harassed and harassed her to the point where she started crying and went to the because she knew she wasn't supposed to have it, but they were bullying her, the
Hmm.
adults.
Hmm.
And she went to and had phoned so that my mom could go and pick her up because she was feeling so intimidated. But they were saying it doesn't matter what your parents said. It doesn't matter if they sign that. You're old enough now at 12, and it can be younger if the nurses or whomever feel that you can understand the consequences or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they started phoning me up at the house and harassing me. And I said, you know what? If you want her to have that, you sign the liability that you're financially responsible. And I never heard from them again.
No, of course not.
But they were going to go behind my back
Hmm.
and bully my child into taking something, and they had no idea. They didn't have her medical history
Mm-mm.
about it. And the same with my stepdaughter, who was vaccinated and then ended up with this horrid seizure disorder. And they don't care. They
They
don't
don't.
have that information. They're still trying to push this stuff
Yep.
without parents' knowledge, and they will hide that information from the
Yes.
parents.
Yes.
Yeah, like
And
this poor
that's
lady, like this poor lady in Port Alberni, that was another thing that really upset me and started this off too, was the vaccination situation, because this lady did not want her child vaccinated at all, and
Mhm.
then I guess went to the kid went to the school at that day, didn't necessarily want the vaccination either. Was kind of going along with the family,
Mhm.
and then at that time this classroom was getting called to go out anybody that wanted to get the vaccination in the classroom, and the kids were bullying that kid at 12 years old to
Mhm.
go get it, you need to get it because their parents have
Have told
said,
him about it.
oh, it's a good thing everybody needs to be vaccinated because if you don't you're going to die
Kill
and all this,
grandma.
you're going to kill grandma. So all these kids are afraid to kill grandma, and then now you're pressuring this kid, so this kid goes to the school and gets vaccinated, and the mother was absolutely devastated. There's countless things that have gone on, and there's even talks about, oh, who was vaccinated in the class, oh, you get donuts or a Timbit today
Yes.
because you did it. Like, the coercion of that is insane, and to
Mob
listen to those
mentality.
stories, there's so many stories, it breaks my heart. So I
Mhm.
mean, that brings us into what I want to talk about
Yes.
also is this age of consent, 12.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now does that mean that behind your parents' back, your kid's going to be able to go get puberty blockers?
Mm-hmm.
Now
I feel
your
like
kid
that's
now is
on.
going to be sterilized,
Yeah.
and so it seems far-fetched.
No,
But
it's not.
then it goes even farther because now MAID starts in
Yes.
March of
Yes.
2024, and that is a mature minor. So now
Mm-hmm.
you're 12. So does that mean that you're going to go and talk to a nurse, and a nurse is going to turn around and say, I feel like this kid is just so
Mature.
depressed. I don't think they're going to make it in life, and put them on the MAID program?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
when you say the
this is
MAID
where this
starts,
seems to me is going, and we need to stop it. Like, this is insane to me.
sorry, I
Insane.
was just going to ask you a question, Lisa, about when you said the MAID starts, you're talking about for like depression, or what is it for? Psychiatric reasons? Mental illness?
Yeah,
Okay.
the mental health. Yeah, mental
For
health.
mental health part piece of it now. Yeah,
And
because May
now,
has always been there.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
now the doctor, the amount of just the same as what you said, the amount of doctors you need to sign off on that now has also changed with the new laws that are coming in, which the
Mhm.
new laws are getting passed on a regular basis now. They're coming in really hard.
Yeah.
And people really need to pay attention to the laws that are changing. So as of March, I don't know if it's 17th, they will change it
Yes.
to a mental illness.
I think they're bringing, and I think what they're doing, if I'm correct, they're bringing it back because they put it on pause. So there's a chance that they might not put it through, but it's back on the table to be discussed. They tabled it for a year because last year they moved up. Like before, it was just like end of life, like terminally ill, and then they dialed that forward to kind of just being like, you don't like your life, like, and then now it's like it can be done like in funeral homes. You can pay to rent the rooms because you essentially pay for that service, right? And so now in Quebec, what they're really pushing is, like we said, the mindful minor. So it's like basically saying that you can, if you are, if you're, and let's be honest, all of us could say at those times, we've had our darkest depressions. That's the whole time. That's the whole point, is being a teenager, is figuring this all out and getting into adult age. And what really upsets me is that what you hear, even just with this whole thing, is all the people that said, I wish I was informed, like a lot of trans kids too, because they're out there, not necessarily that they have that gender story, but they are transitioning children. They're told, essentially, I was watching this one, I think her name's Brianna Ivy, that by doing these surgeries, she will become biologically a woman. So there is a lot of misinformation. I hate that fucking word, but a lot of misguidance, I would say, in that area too, when people are the most vulnerable to being like, yeah, you can actually change these things, because like Serena mentioned, they're changing actual verbiage right up at the top, right where you're teaching nurses and doctors and teachers and psychologists. And like Jordan Peterson says, you're getting told that you can't say and do certain things, that you have to affirm all of them. And it's like, then it's got like science and teachers and smart people behind it, so it must be real. And then it just kind of goes all the way down. And now you're hearing all these kids that even in their own community are being like, oh, I wasn't trans, but I did this, and now I'm not going to live a normal adult life. And I think that's where all of this kind of stems to, is that you guys have such bleeding hearts for those individuals that were preyed upon at a vulnerable time, whether with malintent or not, and now have to deal with this repercussion for the rest of their lives. And it's like, when we talk about Lupron, I want to raise a flag because I got injured by birth control, which is something that is very much normalized and in its own right, its own hormone blocker, not as intense as what's going on here, but it is still something that's so normalized that all 15-year-old girls go and get on birth control. And look what it did to all of us. It can change your sexual drive, it can change your mental health, it can change your gut health, it can change literally everything, but it's so normalized. So I think that's a big key for everyone here, is being like, when we bring it into schools like this, it gets normalized, but no one talks about the effects, right? Like, what is this going to do? So like, let's talk about a little bit more of like what actually goes on in the school. So we hear that they're teaching pronouns, and we hear, okay, there was a talk about anal beads, but like, what is actually going on with those books? Because I know there's been a lot being passed around. What are we kind of seeing in those books that's kind of alarming?
Oh, okay. So you have,
Well, there's the I Am Jazz one, which is for quite young children. It's a picture book, and that's about Jazz Jennings. And
And these
his
books
her
are all
journey,
off the
right?
SOGI 123
And
list,
these
right?
are all from the
Recommended
SOGI book
list.
list.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what we need to say before this happens. They have actually on the website a Soji book list, which
And
I
is
went
that
and
like the kids should read it, or that saying like teachers should
that
read it
is
to have understanding of this better?
no, that is a resource list for teachers to use to bring into their classrooms
Okay, to teach at some
or
point.
their libraries.
So this is the level that they're looking at. I don't know if you can see that,
Yeah.
but it's just
Okay.
cute.
Yeah.
And it was a young boy. I think what was it at so this makes it all lovely that he just likes pink and likes to wear dresses and wants to be a mermaid. So obviously he's born in the wrong body and
Yes.
is going to be a girl.
Yes.
What they don't tell you is that this poor child was just figured that they were transgender at 2
Yeah.
years old.
That's right. Yeah.
And then I don't actually have all the exact numbers, but I think 4 or 6 they were put on puberty blocker.
No, she affirmed that she was a girl,
Okay.
right? And at 11,
Put on puberty blockers.
Yeah.
Now has horrible mental health issues. Does not appear happy. It goes back and forth. So I don't know if this person is happy, but they're showing us to kids like, this is great. You can do this. You're just born in the wrong body, and then you can be different. But this poor child, who's now an adult, is said that they can never have sex again because it hurts and it's not enjoyable. Can't have children, permanently sterilize themselves, and there they are.
and that's a dangerous thing with also some parents who might have mental health issues themselves and are using that as a thing to go the virtual signal for themselves.
Yes.
Which is a scary thing. But here's another one where we got Pride Puppy. Okay. It's very cute. There's a lot of, I don't have a problem with, the Pride thing, but there is a lot of different wonderful things of why you should go to Pride and Pride Parade, and there's Pride Queens, and then there's a guy wearing a shirt who is come out, be proud to be out.
So this age is how are 5-6-year-olds are they reading this?
Yeah, like this is young age, and then so my issue is okay. We're got these lovely
Take that sticker off when you do that.
Oh, we've got these lovely be inclusive, go to Pride, stuff, and fine for the whatever percent of children that might be gay in school systems, but you're like, oh, Pride, it's all good, and then this is Pride, okay? This is Pride when you get there.
It's not the same.
That's why are you promoting to kids in school
That's what I mean.
to go to stuff like that? Why are you doing that?
Yeah.
I'm not understanding why the school has anything to do with any of that. That is a parent's choice. And I'm not quite sure why you would be promoting that stuff. And to me, when you're starting it at that young age and you're like making it normalized to end up the goal being going to see that to me is a grooming progression. Like I don't understand it. Another book that I have a serious problem with. This book is gay. What was this one? What age? 13, 12 or 13 years old to goes with, whatever. Here in this book, right here, it is telling you where to go to hook up with men or gay people.
Interesting.
Here you got how sex apps work. Okay, so now they're telling you, here we go. In here, pro sex app. So it's telling you a good one or a bad one. Tells you, I've used Grindr. The advantages are you can get blah, 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 blah. Why do you have that in school? why are you setting up something to go and have sex with whomever in a park or a nightclub or a bar?
I wouldn't want
Why?
a heterosexual book like that either. That's the thing that makes me so upset is like, I don't want anybody sexualized. It has nothing to do with whom that is with, like that's really none of my business, in my opinion.
Exactly.
But I don't want it for anything. If it was a heterosexual porn book, I wouldn't want that in schools either. I just don't, anything sexual doesn't belong. And that's where I feel like that's, again, there's a conversation of like, okay, you might have gender confusion, but what does that tie to your sexuality? Like, they say they're two different things. So then, okay, well, why are we bringing the sexual part into it? Just for conversation, argument's sake, for devil's advocate, then why can't we just have a conversation of like the gender part and not have it tied to the sexuality part? I think a lot of people wouldn't be as upset about it if that was the case,
Yes. So you have something called, right here, you're called It's Perfectly Normal. It is for 10-year-olds. Okay. Here you go. Why do I want my 10-year-old to be looking at that in school?
I don't.
That's just part of it. I don't know where the one is that where they bend over and they're trying to show you to
with the movie.
Oh, there we go. Here we go. So learn how to check yourself.
That's fun.
It's porn.
That's fun.
Okay, that's porn. I don't care what you say.
That's cartoon porn, yeah. I feel like people have gone to prison for drawing stuff like that and exposing it to kids before, but in schools and
genderqueer. Okay? Genderqueer found in a Okanagan school. I do believe it was a Kelowna school, honey.
Of course it was.
Here you go. There you go. You want your kids reading that? If Stacy reads that to you, you'll be sick.
No, I don't want to. I'm good. I don't
so
want to.
Here is also, Planned Parenthood has also brought to class, and they said it was an accident, and this was on the mainstream news.
More than once.
It's more than once. So it's not like it's something that is made up. So here we go. Are we ready to read this? Is anybody going to be okay?
These were sex cards that were handed out.
I learned some stuff.
Yeah, I'm a prude, so teach me.
Okay, so here we go. F. So they were handed out these cards in grade 9 class. Okay.
And I believe they were told not to bring them to their parents.
Yeah.
And I don't quote me on that, but I believe that was what.
By an accident. Okay, so here's one of the cards. Are we ready for one of the cards the grade 9 class got?
Yeah, okay.
F. F is for, here. Oh, I'll do it like this and take it off. Oh, no, I won't. I'll wreck it. Yeah. Wreck it? Okay, here you go.
Y'all are watching my mom like destroy me, right? Like y'all seeing my mom
read
like.
It. Okay, so here's how they put out these cards, and I have a bunch of them, and it's just, okay, it makes me want to throw up. Okay, I learned this word. It's pretty exciting at 50-something years old. I'm not going to say
now
that.
Just picture a 13-year-old getting this.
Here's a 13-year-old.
I'm uncomfortable, and I'm 37 in 2 weeks, okay?
So was my daughter when I read this to her.
Okay, F. F is for felching. Felching is the act of sucking semen from your partner's butt as if semen didn't taste good enough already. Nothing says lovin' like semen fresh from the oven. If you're going to chow down on some ass-marinated semen, just know that you and your partners are at high risk for HIV and STDs. So it's all about, we need to teach the kids about STDs, so make sure you do it right when you suck semen out of somebody's ass. Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, that is one of them. Should we do some more?
I don't know if I'm going to.
Snowballing is so much fun.
I'm going to band on fucking Rumble. Like,
these cards, where did they come in again? Because were they on the SOGI recommended list or like the resource list?
No, they're not. No. Some school, because this is the thing. If you have resources like Planned Parenthood, so the schools get outside resources and they let these resources in. It's just no different than the nurses being able to come in and give their kids the shot, the vaccinations or whatever they can give them. So this was an outside source coming in to, I don't know if it was Chilliwack or one of the schools in BC. Yeah. So they brought these lovely things in, and snowballing. Nothing says thank you for the blowjob, kind sir, more than spitting jizz back into your partner's mouth. Keep in mind, not only is it possible to pass or get STDs and HIV by snowballing, sperm really isn't a thirst quencher.
Mom, you're gonna get me banned on every fucking platform.
That's
And
why
like,
we have
if that's what tickles your fancy as a consenting adult, like, not for me, but not judging, right? Like,
What
free
the
flag
actual
fly.
F?
But
So don't say that. So everybody's like, oh, they're not teaching anything like that. Okay, how many oops do you need to have? Here's another oops. Okay, and on I think it's Alert Bay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Veronica. Kids got sent home a masturbation sheet. In the masturbation sheet, they have a little square in it, and they are supposed the kindergarten kids are supposed to draw where they masturbate in the house. I think the lady got fired, maybe, but I'm not quite sure.
But there's a
Where does it
in
stop?
IMO that still says that that's appropriate because it's teaching children appropriate touching or something like that. That's what scares me.
Okay. To that counter argument, and I know that's not you that coming up with that argument. Are we teaching kids how to stop unwanted sexual advances at the same time?
I think that
is that part of, you know what I'm saying? Like, okay, so we're all about like, protection, but are we teaching like if we're gonna quote unquote talk to kids about sexuality, like wouldn't it be to like what's appropriate and what's not appropriate? Maybe that should be taught. Like, no adult should be able to,
If you
right?
wear
Like,
your bathing suit,
exactly.
So
But
on the
we're
sheet,
asking,
it says what places in your home are private. So they're asking right there, what you're asking a kid where in their house is private, which is weird.
that's a
And then
pedophile's dream.
draw a picture of private places where you can touch your penis or vulva if you want to.
So this poor
I
child
need to
went
have a
to
shower
their parents.
after this conversation, I feel like. Okay, so
Yeah, it's a little frustrating, and I think it's, what is it, the UN or the WHO?
either of them are fucked.
I think it's either the UN, maybe it's the WHO. I have to look at the papers again. We have the papers, and I'd have to check on that for you, but I know it's one of the two, the UN or the WHO. They are promoting having masturbation from ages 0 to 4. They want that taught. Then the next one was masturbation and touching.
Yeah.
Was it touching yourself and other kids?
Didn't Kinsey die? Is he not dead?
And then and then by 9 years old, they're talking about you should have your first sexual experience.
Was it 9?
Yeah.
I guess I thought I was a late bloomer. I thought like 16 was late, but compared to that, I am like a grandma from when I lost mine. Like,
why are you pushing that?
I don't know. I remember when I was younger, 12 was like the youngest I'd ever heard, and that was like a very uncomfortable situation for her. Wasn't really something that she wanted. And that's where it kind of blows my mind with this stuff just a little bit, is that we've heard from younger people that have been abused in this area talk about how profoundly that affected them for the rest of their lives. I never had any sort of physical sexual abuse as a young child. However, there was a lot of focus on like my looks and the value of that and what that meant. And so innately, I think we all grew up thinking that our sexuality was what our value was. And so this is where I struggle very much also with this whole movement, is like trying to get away from you are everything of your sexuality. You're so much more than that. So I think for me, it's another flag and a struggle to be like, as a child that grew up in a hypersexualized time, and let's say quote unquote good looking, and that was the focus, it has done so much damage for my body dysmorphia, my face dysmorphia, my connection to myself just as a female, and has done so much damage. It's like, again, why can't we raise these flags of saying just in a normal situation, it fucked a lot of us up? Why are we expanding that even more when we know what we already went through was toxic with birth control, like just for females as in general. And now I feel bad for trans women that are, you don't look like enough of a woman and are constantly having to get all these things, constantly having to put cake of makeup on and do all those things. Like, and I'm not saying that that's not the end goal, but shouldn't that child get a chance to talk to a proper professional that talks to them? But now it's changed to, like Serena said, this is the now path to it. It's not, why is this happening? It's like, oh, this is happening. Here's what we're going to do. It's not looking into why is there, and I'm not saying all, but could there be some like deep homophobia in there? Could there be some, sexual trauma that came from? You hear that quite often with some of these. It's like, I was abused as a woman, as a child, and I didn't want any other man to be attracted to me. So I kind of became more masculine to hide that. And then you hear of, like, I don't know if you guys seen the twin flame cult, and then you're getting told that you're more of a masculine. So therefore you must be in the wrong body than you're a man. And they're like, no, I'm not, so it just, even adults get confused with this.
Can I add something to that?
Of course, please.
So an interesting story that I heard recently that I had never really considered before because I just never come across it. There's a First Nation man I was speaking with who has, I'll say a leadership type of role in his community. And we got into this topic and he said, they try not to really focus too much on this because for that, like the soji stuff, because in their teachings, in their stories, the feelings that you have, like say you're a female, like you're born female, but you might feel more masculine at a certain time, or vice versa. If you're a male, you might feel more feminine. He says in their story, that's the ancestors' presence. And so to label that as, oh, I must be something else, to confuse the person about their sexuality is going in a totally different path than what their teaching is, which is, you're feeling maybe really sensitive at this time of your life, or more in tune or intuitive or more compassionate, and that's for a reason. There's the presence of your ancestors are always here, and they come at different times stronger. Certain ones will be stronger presence depending on what you're going through, or your questions that you have, or whatever you're doing in your path, right? And so to confuse the children, and it also, aren't we talking about truth and reconciliation as well in Canada? Like, how are we overstepping the stories of these people again? And
Totally.
people are just blindly, like most people, like myself included, I didn't even know this story existed. Like, but there's a group of people that are feeling violated and victimized again, and our government on the leadership is doing it again to this group of people. But there's another group of people too. There's many, but what about the sexual abuse victims? Like you mentioned, there's people that have been through sexual abuse a lot. What's the statistics for females in Canada and males? It's quite high. Last time I checked, it was like, God, I don't have it in front of me. So, but I'd be willing if anybody wants to find that number. But it's like, it's high. It's like out of 4 for boys. I want to say it's like 1 or 2. And then for girls, it's even higher. I might be off about that, but whatever it is, even if it's 10% of the population,
it's too much.
Even if it's 0.1% of the population, they still are should be woven into the story and valued, and they're just totally being overstepping as well. And so, there's all these groups that are being potentially being triggered by this, but nobody's talking about that because this inclusion.
And like Stacey always says, the erasing of women.
That like that's a whole other part of it. The women.
Yeah.
And to add on to that, sorry, Mark, just Serena, or even, and I think a lot of cultures are finding that same thing, or religion, right, where they have their certain beliefs, and this has now come in, even just saying the French language, like we were raised, it's masculine, feminine when it comes to even conjugating the language itself, right? And even if you look into spirituality, if you look into that way where it's like masculine and feminine energy, and that's where that twin flame got them caught up. Well, for example, I was raised by a very strong woman that had to step into her masculine energy for us to survive. And so therefore, by her mimicking that, I automatically just exude more of a like alpha, take care of myself, until I found that person that balanced that and allowed me to step into my feminine energy and be able to be that carer, that nurturer, that home giver, all of those things that I believe like I'm meant to do, because I was then safe to do so. In those times, if we were where we are now, it was like, and I did that, it'd be like, oh, well, you're obviously a lesbian and you're butch or you're trans, and it's like, no, I'm just having to be the masculine, having to take care of everything because I'm solo, right? And the balance, the yin and the yang, whether you're whatever. That's why I do believe like 100% there's like gays and all that, of course, and they'll balance in their energies, but we can show up differently in those energies just as humans. That doesn't mean that one day when I feel like, oh, Grant's not here and I got to take care of the jag that's fucking steaming and he's not here and I got to do all that. It doesn't mean that I'm going to go then chop my tits off because I'm showing up as a man that day. You know what I mean? Like, and it says, I'm not trying to be that way, but it's almost like we don't like labels, but labels are what we live and breathe by. It's like, it's not a binary, but it is a binary. And it's like, okay, there's just so much confusion within that itself and in that own community. And they are even fighting against each other. It's like, again, why are we bringing children into this? I'm not saying that community should not exist. Everyone has a right to believe and breathe and be who they are. That's fine. But you're confused as 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 year olds. Why are we bringing this into children's lives, into their schooling? School, to me, what I would hope, and I would like to get into this next, is to teach you how to be a nice person, to be empathetic, to be a contributing member of society by being a doctor, a nurse, a librarian, an accountant, a healer, whatever it is that you choose. That's what, to me, you should be taught. And the social aspect, the quote unquote political aspect, should be outside, because we're seeing that, like you said, Mom, leaking in, where kids are getting bullied based off of what their parents think, not necessarily even what they're thinking, because they're fucking kids. They shouldn't understand Biden and Trump. Like, yeah, it's a joke, haha. But like, they shouldn't be worrying about that. Like, keep that away. And it should be the teacher's job to protect that political aspect, staying outside the schools, so kids aren't bullying. Because the more we bring these politics in by race, gender, class, all of that, sexual orientation, gender ideology, it is dividing them more and making them all bully each other even more. And we're getting further away from it. And then their parents are at home and they're upset because they don't know how to deal with it, and it's leaking down. And then all of a sudden now we're fighting when we're having protests and fighting in the streets, instead of coming together as adults, regulating our emotions properly and sitting down and being like, this is what you think, this is what you think, that okay, so how do we come together? Instead of just being like, well, I'm right because of this and you're right, you know what I mean? Like, but you can't do that anymore. You can't have dialogue.
It's so difficult to have those conversations because they're silencing you.
Totally.
The laws in BC or in Canada, you can only talk about positive aspects.
Yeah.
You can't I can't think of the word right now, but
you can't
what is it?
Everything.
Conversion. It's conversion therapy.
Yes. Yeah.
You cannot do that. So you can only affirm anything like with mental health issues here. It can only be affirmed. So you can't ever really talk about, oh, well, you know what? There are some downsides to cutting off your penis or taking Lupron.
I can show you what the downsides are. It's just pretty disgusting.
They do not talk about anything.
You really
so that's informed consent for any of these children or parents or anybody that hasn't looking into this. They're not providing informed consent. They're not telling you, oh my goodness, you could do this and then it's going to wreck your bones.
Yes.
Or you're going to be sterile, or you could lose your eyesight taking these drugs. They don't talk about any of that. And that to me is disgusting, but that is the laws in Canada where you can't say anything negative.
Yeah. I feel sorry for a parent right now. I can't imagine what that feels like. Like, quite honestly, now you're sitting here and you got this kid. And so there's a California law that's coming in that when you don't affirm your kid the way they want you to, you can actually leave your parents at 12 years old and go and be in the system in California anytime you want. So now they're into the system. So now you've got these laws so tight that now when the kid complains about you, your kid can get taken away. So now you are completely in fear of getting your kid taken away because you're not going along with what they're saying. So you took your kid's phone from them because they did something not good. They've done something inappropriate on the internet or whatever they've done. So now your kid can turn around and say, oh, well, they didn't affirm that I'm a cat. So now you're worried about getting your kid taken away. Yeah. So it's leaving parents in a very, very bad position, and they're locked. They're locked where they can't take them out of the school system because most of them are working 3 jobs just to even be able to put food on the table and house the kids and trying to make sure that they're mentally okay. So now you're a single parent and you're sitting here going, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Am I going to feed my child? Am I going to house my child? Or am I going to send them to the school? And if they get mentally screwed up, maybe I can help them later and get out of it. It's better than them going through what they're going through. Now the kid's turning around and they're complaining and they're stamping their feet because now they've been affirmed in everything that they do and everything they think at 12 years old, even though their puberty has gone insane and their brains have gone insane. They don't even know what's going on. They have now just stamped their feet and gotten themselves taken away from that family unit, which is the last thing the kid wants to do, but they are not mentally okay to even understand what is going on. Your brain is not developed until you're 25 years old, and I don't even understand why this is even put in schools.
Because you're not allowed to get a tattoo. You're not allowed to smoke. You're not allowed to drink alcohol. You're not allowed to drive a vehicle. But you can decide to permanently sterilize yourself at such a young age. And then somebody did a cute little thing and where they had somebody saying, oh, well, my child decided that they were a pirate. So I got them set up with a doctor to have their eye removed. We've got a patch. And then they're going to have their hand cut off so they can have the hook, because that's what they, that's what they
fucking carrot.
To the extent we're getting to with this. It's just like, where does this stop?
And where do parents go? Where do parents go? What happens to parents? Like, I feel sorry for parents. And like, we put on this thing, this education thing. Hardly any parents came because what? They're scared. They're scared to say anything. They're scared to move. They're scared to do anything.
They don't want to be canceled. Sorry,
but then we're also called like we're haters. How they put it out that we're just these evil people that hate, and we don't. We just don't want people or their children going into something blindly or with the incorrect information, because it's not allowed to be provided. Same with the vaccines. Like the doctors in BC cannot say what is best for their patient. They have to say what the government. And so it's the same sort of thing. And I mean, how much are those children worth to pharma? When you start looking at this, it's in the millions of dollars just each for the medication, each child, when they get them on these puberty blockers and then the cross-sex hormones and then starting into the surgeries. Those children, confused children, are worth a shit ton of money to pharma. And
beauty industries and any industry really, like in every single industry is going to, and where's the value in telling them that maybe, or just helping them through that, let's put the money towards going through that. You should be able to go through years of therapy before that happens and make those decisions when your body's naturally doing its things. Sorry, Serena, I'd cut you off earlier. What were you saying?
Oh no, I was just going to say, and I think how they're the foundation of sort of a lot of these actions that they're doing, like say the Infants Act and the mature minor stuff, doing stuff behind the parents' back without including them in the process. I think the idea is they justify it because they're saying the risk is greater if we don't do this. And the risk of suicide is what they're talking about, mental illness leading to suicide. So they're saying if we don't get you transitioned, you're, with your gender dysphoria, and you don't take the treatment that the DSM-5 has laid out, the pharmaceuticals and all that, antidepressants, antipsychotics, puberty blockers, etc. If you don't do all that, then you're at risk, according to our statistics that we've put together here, you're at risk of falling into a demographic of, suicide, higher risk of suicide. But that number is arguable. There's a whole where do you get your numbers from conversation that should be had. It is being had on the sidelines, like we're talking about it, but there's this divide, right? Like you guys are saying, there's this divide that's been put where people don't even want to talk now. They're like, nope, we got our numbers, we're good. We're going to go ahead. We're going to protect these children. The other side saying, well, we have our numbers and we see our children and we know our children and we love our children more than anybody. We're going to, go with these numbers that we found too, which is saying, actually, if you transition statistically, you have a higher rate of suicide and depression and all of these things, right?
Or something higher.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And it's still so young. It's still such a new issue that we don't really understand the long term yet. So there's all these unknowns as well. Even with the Lupron and that, there's a lot of evidence to show it does lead to irreversible changes in your body, where some people were trying to say, no, you can just go off the blockers at any time and your body will resume, right? But that's not how our bodies work. It's a constantly moving system of constantly changing, and if you inject something into it or put something into it at a certain time, you can't go back in time. So how can you say this is irreversible? So
and who here loved puberty?
What's
Did
that?
anybody enjoy going through?
No.
Did anybody here enjoy going through puberty?
I feel like I'm still going
No.
through it, man.
I mean, yes and no. I guess
Period.
there's good times and bad times. But,
Yeah.
but
you
that's
don't have to feel like shit.
but maybe
We
we
all
taught
felt
our
as a child.
if we taught our children like self-love, like you're saying, Lisa, before, like create that strong foundation within. Don't put it outside in pharmaceuticals. Don't put it outside in these,
likes and Instagrams
Yeah.
and social media. Yeah.
It's
Teaching them to
inside.
love yourselves.
And we're
Yeah.
taking away all the religious stuff from schools, or it has been taken away. All the stuff that might have a little bit of foundation that they can teach in the person of inner strength. And they're replacing it with this ideology which goes against so many people. So there might be a demographic that love it and want it, and even people that aren't maybe don't consider themselves on the LGBTQ. They're what's the name? Allies, yeah. But there's a lot of people that don't like it and don't want it, and that it directly goes against their spiritual beliefs in their family. But yeah, this is the whole, what's the role of the parent? What's the role of education? What's the role of government? This is what it's trying to be defined right now, because there's been a lot of gray areas. There's been a lot of social norms, which has taken care of that for us. Like if a teacher came in 20 years ago into the education system and brought in those cards, Lisa, like that would be shunned by everybody.
Immediately shut down.
Yeah. A loss of your job.
Yeah,
maybe
why
the
isn't
union
it now?
What's that?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, and why isn't it now? Like, you know why? Because they don't know about it. They don't know.
That's part of
like
it.
You can't even get into the, like Serena will attest to this, and Stacy. We try to get into a school board meeting. So one of the people we know actually tried to ask a question of why even Soji's in school. They said that they weren't going to discuss it, and because it wasn't on the agenda, and this is how they try to get around it so they don't have to discuss it. And then they put you off to the superintendent who is supposed to be in charge of it. Well, we find out later on that the superintendents are not answering the calls from the people that are trying to ask these questions. So if it's such a wonderful program, tell me how come nobody wants to talk about it. Why isn't there a full, like, why aren't school boards coming out and going, no, this is great? And why are they not trying to, like, if there's so many people upset about it, why are they not trying to prove that it's fine?
Yeah.
Instead, they're actually trying to close in, and they're not even offering conversations.
And in our community, we had a couple moms go to the school board meeting talking about how they didn't like what some of the books with the SOGI program, and they were told, if you don't like it, pull your kids and homeschool them. There was no discussion about how to make things better, how to work with the parents, anything. And then you're asking, like, who's trumps who?
Yeah, which is a quote on minority. Like which one are you respecting? I mean that in the kindest way, like Serena brought up, like the First Nations, that they're not the only culture out there that, has an opposing view to what is being shown in schools. Like we've seen a bunch of different religions, different cultures, especially in the March, and that are going to these things that are saying, hey, like, that's fine if you want to practice that in your own home, within your own culture and your beliefs, that's totally fine. But now you're infringing on mine. And so, and I mean this kindly, I know like might be a hot take here, but if we, there's always that focus, and of course of biracial people of color, but it's like, but you're directly stepping on that group after you've just, been spending years trying to elevate those individuals. Now all of a sudden they're now being trumped, and they're now some sort of phobic because their religion that you were just trying to protect goes against that. You're going to start to eat yourselves in your conversation when you're social justice warriors, because at what point do you have to make, a little bit of line? And that's why, in my opinion, all things need to exist. And it comes back to the parents, like, if you want to have, and this is just my opinion, no hot take, and everyone can have a different ones. There's friends of mine that bring their kids to drag and they absolutely love it. And then there's some that don't even want them to know there exists and hate them. And I don't think any are right or wrong, but in my opinion, if we believe in free speech, then it should all be able to exist. But there's got to be common grounds in places that there are boundaries, like school. To me, school, like, again, is our basic stuff. Like, teach your kids how to do fucking taxes and how to budget this inflation and how to have telepathic remedies. how to use some like garlic and honey for that cough instead of grabbing that bottle of Tylenol that's full of red dyes that's going to make you sicker. Like things like that. Like none of us were taught proper nutrition, proper sleep cycles. How about for women? Oh, my lights just died. How to track your cycle and what does that mean? What is actual birth control? Like all of those things that will set us up as functioning adults, we're not taught, and it's getting worse and worse as years go on. And it's like, I'm not saying that there's not space for social justice and that these individuals don't need places. They absolutely do. I would really love to see, not classes, but therapists that are there to help children that are having hard times at home, whether that's with food, with communication, with their gender, with their race, with their status. Like there has to be some of that. But I think the core of school needs to be back to the basics, and parents teach whatever at home, teach them to be kind. There's this one teacher that I love, he's gay, and he was like, I don't want to be teaching kids about that. But if a child is in there that has two moms, I want her to know that that is okay and everything's great, but I don't need to explain what that means to someone else's child, that child has two moms, just that child has two moms, and that is okay. End of. All right, babes, it's time to take a tiny little break of this amazing episode to do another shout out. For this episode, I wanted to take it local to where I'm from and where our guests are from, so Port Alberni, and I wanted to make sure to highlight a business that I absolutely love to go to every single time I'm home, someplace that my mom loves to go, and a place that was open and catering to everyone over the last couple years. So that is something that I very much appreciate, being someone who wasn't able to go out and do much. So I wanted to take a minute and thank and highlight Boomerang's Cafe. If you guys have been in Port Alberni, you have probably driven by this amazing little cafe. It is absolutely delicious food. I love it. I seriously go every single time. And if you guys have watched, I think the show's called Big Timber on Netflix, they actually go to the Boomerang Cafe, which I think is super cool. It just made me see my hometown and just a perfect representative. So Boomerangs is a little cafe, like I said, on Johnson Road in Port Alberni. They're a locally owned, family operated restaurant. They, again, have delicious food. We'll go over their menu. They serve local beers like Vancouver Island Brewing, Twin City, and they also serve Australian beers because that's kind of all their theme is, bringing Australian food and some favorites to Port Alberni. So a little history on them. Darren was born in England and grew up in Sydney, Australia. He made his way to Canada in his late teens and eventually began working in the restaurant industry while raising his two children. His love and knowledge of food was established here in Port Alberni, where he started out as a dishwasher and worked all the way up to head chef. Laura worked in numerous restaurants in Port Alberni until a certain cafe brought the two of them together. In the spring of 2010, Darren and Lauren were married and two families were united. That's the story. They both dreamed of owning their very own restaurant and creating an Australian atmosphere rich in art and culture. So they decided to bring Port Alberni a little taste of down under and a little piece of paradise Darren calls home. Two dreams became one. We'd like to welcome you to Boomerang's Cafe. We'll keep you coming back. And they do, you guys, every single time I am home. This is a must on my visit list. I love it. Their breakfasts are just my favorite. Their lunches too, but I'm a sucker for breakfast, and this is one of my favorites. They are open 7 days a week and closed on some holidays, 6 to 4 p.m. every single day. Like I said, you can find them at 4833 Johnson Road, Port Alberni. That's right at the bottom of Johnson Road there, and their phone number is 250-724 5794. Make sure you guys head down there if you are in Port Alberni. Like I said, they have breakfast and lunch, tons of different options like the traditional breakfast, bennies. There's something called Little Brekkie, Brekkie Quesadilla. I'll put their menus up here. There's tons of sides. They have some favorites from Australia as well, Vegemite, and they just have tons of stuff like steak and eggs. I'm just a sucker for traditional breakfast, and there's just certain places that just brings you the freshest breakfast, and this is one of them. They also have kids menus. They also have lunch, so you can go there for tons of different salads, sandwiches, quesadilla, wraps, all this stuff here. There's burgers, like there's literally like a 4 or 5 page menu. That's my favorite thing about Port, is that the local restaurants always have so much good food, and it's actually kind of really hard to choose. But again, guys, I just wanted to shout out to Boomerangs because I know that they have delicious food. They're welcome to everybody, and they just are a complete staple to me in Port Alberni when I go home. An absolute gem. So make sure you guys can go visit them and give them a shout out when you get there. Anyways, guys, let's jump back into this episode. Story, end of conversation. Let's get back to math, and I just respected that so much because I was like, I think, again, we see these conversations and they look like they're so extreme, but most people actually fall very centrist once you get talking to them. And they actually all have the same common goals, is that they don't want children to be hurt or felt included, excluded, and alone. And I think that is what everyone thinks, but there is some, not saying you guys, but there are egos involved that play too, right? Where it's like, well, I had this experience as a child, so I'm fighting for that because that was my experience, and I don't want another kid to feel that way. And then on the other side, you have the same, right? So it's like coming together with those arguments and being like, I understand that. Can we create some safe space where people can then go together and have that maybe doesn't affect the rest of the school and the rest of the kids, so we're not infringing on other cultures and religions, and maybe we don't want to have those conversations because that child was sexually abused, and maybe that's not the right place because that child is just working through that healing. And now you're talking about anal sex when that child may have been abused that way, and what are you doing, like we said earlier, for that child in that abused state, right?
Exactly. And so that's the same, like, okay, if you're going to have school and you're going to have class, have it in class as a part of a project or part of the curriculum in that at that time. And then you can tell parents that this is happening at this time, and then they can choose to pull that kid out if they want to at that time. There's not saying stop doing it. Like, that's insane. And I mean, the other side of that too is like, so now they're pushing the ideology of gender and sexuality. Okay, so some people, and there's a people that scream and yell about the Catholic Christian side and it being an ideology. Well, they've taken that out of school pretty much now. You're not allowed to have that in, no more Christmas concerts or whatever. It's got to be called something else, whatever. I mean, that changed. I kind of get it a long time ago. So why is another ideology coming in? And why was the other one not allowed? For another thing, I also have to say, you got the LGBT screaming that we don't care about them, and all that kind of stuff. Well, we actually do, because what happens when, say, another politician gets in, and this is why politics shouldn't be in school. Another politician gets in, they are all about being complete hardcore Catholic.
Yeah.
And now in your school,
or Muslim,
there is crosses everywhere. Yeah. And, instead of pride flags, now we got crosses everywhere. And you've got all these other people who do not want that. Okay, now your counselor is a priest. Everybody's like, oh, but priests rape kids and they're pedophiles too. Okay, so don't say that I'm not fighting for your side too, for that not to be there. That doesn't belong there.
Because it could be Sharia law next, for all we know.
It could be Sharia law. It could be anything. Like a Sharia law, I do believe that you're allowed to get married at 6 years old. You're allowed to marry a kid at 6 years old.
I mean, that's what I made my best decisions, was at 6. So it only makes sense.
This is what I'm saying.
But you're female, so
that's right. I'm allowed. So it's fine. It's fine.
So what they're not understanding is it's not only fighting, it's fighting for children. It isn't fighting about LGBT and all that other stuff. It's fighting for children not to have politics in their classrooms, especially in elementary school. Yes. And if it's going to be a part of one. Well, I had a conversation when we were about to have the march or whatever, and this Native gentleman was saying, this lady came in and she was all mad about the smudging or whatever, and we didn't ask the kid in the class. And I said, you know what? I said, I don't want to be rude. And I said, and I have nothing against the Native culture whatsoever. I said, but at that time, Christianity stuff was being kicked out of school, and everybody was up in uproar. And I said, to me, that is also another thing. It's a culture. It's a culture of some certain amount of people. And I understand that culture should be taught in school, and they should have a class of where our founding fathers and the people that were in these lands a long time ago, how that all came about and how that history was. It should be in a history class. I don't feel like it needs to be pushed into everything every kid does. So I feel like that the misunderstanding is that when you see people marching out like that, most of them just want it to be equal for everybody. Um, and they're not just fighting
just one side.
against you. They're fighting for everybody when
Yeah.
when it comes down to this, because kids should always be kids. When you say leave these kids alone, that's what that means. It has nothing to do with like, you gay people leave my kids alone, you're going to turn my kids gay because they're gay. That is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. It has nothing to do with any of that. That it's all like, oh, it's all about because you think everybody is pedophiles. That's not what it is either.
No, but
Pay
there are out
attention.
there though. There are out there, and they do put themselves to these type of groups. Like you see them always going to like missing children organizations and stuff like that, right? Like Amber Alerts. You've seen all the bad people that have been part of that, you know, like because it does. And you see these scams that go around with like using children as bait, and they're such a pawn, right? Because they are so innocent and perfect, and we want to protect that, right? And so that's what I mean. I think everyone comes in the same place of wanting to protect, because maybe you were raised in a shitty home that you couldn't express yourself, and so you went through years of torment. I get that. I totally get that. I'm not saying that there shouldn't be conversations, but like you said, like a course, like when people are like, oh well, they always taught heterosexual. Yes, sex education due to reproduction, because that is how we move our society forward, by reproduction. It wasn't we have sex because it feels good to get head. Like that wasn't the like, you know what I mean, the idea of that. Yeah, that, which again, we're just going to erase that from my memory. I'm going to like whip through that when I'm editing, and I'm just going to pretend that's not even a thing. But, you know, where I do believe that there should be, because we are progressive and we are being more inclusive. But like, I'm not trying to be this way, but I feel like there's always a part of a decade that was very understanding to sexuality. I don't know where that came up, that it wasn't. Like you hear, okay, let's go back to the 60s. Well, it was the roaring 60s. Everyone was fucking. And then you hear about the 70s. It's like, well, they were fucking then too. And it was like, oh, the 90s, like everyone was just so okay to be who they were. Like we had all of those different styles. In 2000, same thing. There was all these extremes. And I'm not saying that there wasn't oppression, there wasn't homophobia, none of those. But you could literally look at any sort of social movement, and there's going to be oppressed people within it. To me, that is the human experience, is coming here and working through all of those roadblocks, whatever they may be, whatever destiny you chose to come here to learn. So it's like, if we continually try to bubble everything so no one has a hard experience, how the fuck are we going to evolve as people? How are we going to progress? How did we progress now that people can have gay marriage, whereas 10 years ago they couldn't? So progression is good. But there's also these extremes where the creepy fucks come in, and it's like, you know, we'll talk about, let's say, like people that, I'm not saying all non-binary, but say there's a non-binary person that has a beard and he's wearing a dress and he's saying he's a trans person. Well, OG trans people are saying, well, that's not true because you want to be identified and as a woman. So having a beard would link you to a man. So you're not trans, right? So it's like, there's so much confusion within that own space. And I think that it really sucks for the original people that broke through those boundaries for our progression. Now it's like it's going too far. Like, oh, they're putting litter boxes outside of classrooms because kids want to be a cat. And like before we got on, like, y'all have 3 cats. Don't affirm your child being a cat. Litter stinks. I don't know what that would smell like as like adult children, but it's like, where do we put the boundaries on kids' feelings and imaginations? And do we need to be putting that in school where it can now grow? Or can we say that kids are already struggling to focus on the basics? Now we're just adding these different layers. So can we look at extracurricular classes, or a course on it, or an elective, right? Like say you have someone that is super religious, super Christian, super Catholic. They don't want that. So that's not an elective class that they choose in their junior high schools. Maybe they choose religious studies. You know what I mean? Like, could we live in a world where those options are then available for everyone? So it's true inclusivity, not excluding and putting people and dividing them into boxes, which I thought we were trying to get away from.
They are doing that with women and girls in the high school. Girls in the high school with their lovely inclusive bathroom don't feel comfortable using it.
Yes.
And are waiting. They're going to end up with bladder infections, but they're saying that they do not feel comfortable. But if they complain, according to the SOGI resources for the teachers, they are to be reprimanded for not being inclusive. So where's their rights? Women and girls are a protected class for their own safety, but yet the rights places of somebody gender non-conforming, those rights supersede the rights of women and girls. The most vulnerable class pretty well in the world, other than disabilities, people with disabilities. But so who's more important with that? And then you have kids that are deciding that they're cats and can hiss at teachers and that, and they have to affirm it. Like, that is,
when does it stop?
Like, to what extent are we going to get before that? And then they're taking over the sports. Like, guys can just decide, oh, I'm a girl and I'm going to go and take over, or go into women's sports or girls' sports and get all the awards. And they're like, men have, even boys, they had, I think it was the boys' high school soccer team were able to beat the women's that were in like the Olympics, or I'm not a sports follower, but the high school boys were able to beat the top women's league.
Just built different.
So you can't say that there's no difference when you putting in, and they're going in and they're absolutely destroying women in sports. They're taking away their awards, they're taking their scholarships, they're taking their medals, the possibility of endorsements, all absolutely gone. So who gives a shit about women?
So why are kids trying? Why are little kids trying to even be in these sports if the boys are little girls? But little girls, even in school, why are they even trying? Yeah. Why would they even try? Because they already know they're going to get beat out. So why would you even bother? I, for one, wouldn't want to sign up for one of those sports.
No.
Because why? You're always going to get beat. Like,
and again, if they complain, they're, in some instances, I don't know if that's Canada for sure, but there are some instances in Canada where women have lost their awards to men. And then there's like, think about this. Like, I worked at a transition house for battered women, and beating up a woman, like, that is like one of the worst things you can do. It's illegal. But then they've got this boxing league where they allow this, I think it's Fallon Fox.
Oh yeah,
biological male.
Yep.
In the women's boxing, and
fractured her head, didn't she?
Oh, so so people can go in and cheer on some man beating the shit out of a woman on TV for money. Yeah. Like, that is fucked up.
Yeah, absolutely screwed up.
And that is in the name of inclusion.
Yes.
And kindness.
And now, so when you're even also talking about going into schools, what, like when Serena was saying the amount of sexually abused kids on either side, how comfortable do you feel, teenager wise, even kid wise, going into a bathroom where there's a male, and who's monitoring that? Who's monitoring the fact that they're in that bathroom with the opposite sex? So how do you know, that kid's not going to go to the bathroom? The kid's going to be too afraid to go to the bathroom. You've already got kids, like, even past, in my kids that were going to school, absolutely terrified to go to school. Like, just didn't want to go to school, didn't want the social, didn't want whatever. I can't imagine what it's like now. I can't imagine. And where are those girls' voices to say, I don't want them in my bathroom?
They can't.
I don't want them in my bathroom.
They'll be socially executed.
And why is there something wrong? I'm sorry. I don't want to be rude. I don't want them in my bathroom.
Yeah.
Like, misogyny again. It's male privilege again.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to support it. And everybody's against the patriarchy, but hey, if you just identify as something else, we're all good, and we're gonna just let you do whatever you want.
Well, and two, you're giving more money to the patriarchy when you are transitioning, because that's who owns majority of those beauty industries, plastic surgeries, the pharmaceuticals are most men. Like, I don't like claim to be any sort of feminist, but I just kind of, not giggle because it's not funny, but kind of, it's like we hate the patriarchy, but we're literally funding all of their businesses kind of through our insecurities, right? Because if we were secure and we didn't care, I would love to get a new nose. I'm never going to get plastic surgery to do that. I'd rather spend the time to just be like, it's fine. That doesn't make you a better person or less person because of your nose. But if I leaned into that insecurity, well, I'll probably be a cash cow for the rest of my life, because I'm affirming there is something wrong with my nose. I need to fix it. And I'm just going to keep on that, right? So instead of teaching kids that you could just fix it, just change it by a surgery, you can't. I'm sorry, guys. You can't change your body dysmorphia. You can't change your face dysmorphia. You can't change entirely. Like, can you change it to the point where it's like that dysphoria is gone? Sure. There's lots of trans people that say when they fully transition that they will then not feel euphoric, because it's not about feeling euphoric. It's about not feeling dysphoric anymore, right? and there's a huge difference. And then there's a lot of people, and this is where I challenge those that say they don't come out. Just look up detrans on YouTube and just see the pain that they've gone through. One is too many, Jazz Jennings being one of them that has not come out as a detrans. But like you said, there's so much more complications. There's so many lies that are going on there when it could be several different things. So for me personally, like to kind of like round this at the end is I think that what people need to understand is no one's saying that LGBTQ people should exist or that they shouldn't have their own spaces or they shouldn't be able to be themselves. It's more of the warning flags of some of the extremes that are out there that your own community isn't calling out and saying that they don't exist. And if there's no understanding to that, then there's no accountability because people outside of that community cannot be holding these people accountable because we cannot understand them. So therefore, it needs to go to the people within the community to hold that extremes. Just like for me, on if I lean more right, I absolutely fucking hate extreme right wing shit. Like I do. I hate it as well. I don't like, those things. But then so I try to hold those people accountable on my side by being like, hey, you know what? No, trans people do exist. They should have their own spaces. That's different than saying keep the sexual stuff out of school. Like these are many different topics that are just being blurred under one thing. And it's like transphobia, hate, da 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 da. And it's like, no,
Division.
it's not.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's like a progression. You need to go somewhere. For example, me being in the cannabis industry, there's people in the world that think it's the devil's lettuce. I think it is God's gift to earth, So how am I going to bring the people that think it's the devil's lettuce into a little bit by understanding that it isn't God's gift to everybody, that there is complications to it, right? So if I come out and I want these people at this extreme to come meet me a little bit, I'm going to have to do the same thing. But it seems like nobody can do that. People can't communicate anymore because it's cancel culture. You're this kind of phobic, and then people are afraid to even ask questions, like walking on eggshells because I don't want to offend anybody. I'm like, let's trigger people. Why are you mad about this? Why am I mad about this? Let's figure it out.
And our political leaders are the example of pitting people against each other and not making the bridge happen. And the sad thing is that like they want you to be triggered right away and get triggered right away and go, whoa, whoa. So they won't even have a conversation. How are you ever supposed to bridge it? How are you ever supposed to bridge it when words are being used as weapons?
Yeah. And violence. Words is violence now. And it's like, yeah, there's an emotional component to words. But again, how much are we being taught to not put energy into that, right? Like, Mom, you've always kind of taught me that, right? Like, people can say whatever they want about you. That's their business. You know you, right? So it's like, when we're having all these out where we're getting emotional about what other people are thinking, we're teaching and breeding the next generation that outside validation is the most important. Shouldn't we be trying to get away from that and being like, you're a good person, you be a good person, you focus on you, not worry about what everyone else perceives you to be. But now all of a sudden it's like, well, who you're perceived to be is then therefore who you are. Like I share one thing and then someone takes it the wrong way. And now there's verbal diarrhea in my DMs about how an awful person I am. And I'm like, because I wanted to preserve a little bit of my fertility and wanted to hold back on getting a vaccine, I'm now a grandma killer and I should be brought to an island and shot. How do we get there? It's the same thing with this. All we're saying is let's keep sexuality out of this for the parents, whether they're religious, culture, maybe their parents, maybe your parent has been abused. Maybe your parent has been sexually abused and that is a lot for them and they're working through it. And then you're coming home talking about those kind of things. Like there's so many different outcomes that I think when it comes to this, especially being such a hot, controversial topic, let's just leave it at home. Politics at home.
Yeah, they showed there's a stat or the stats of before the kids going for gender care, and as soon as Soji came in, it skyrocketed.
At the same time, TikTok came around too, because I feel like TikTok has a lot to do with that.
12% increase all of a sudden, and that they say that is a social contagion. It is not a natural occurring behavior in children. So what is happening in these schools is, and I mean even preschool cartoons, Blue's Clues, Pride Parade, and they had this other little one for preschoolers where the little bull.
Paw Patrol. There's Paw Patrol.
Paw Patrol has it.
Non-binary kid or non-binary animal or something like that.
It was a bull, and it was a little girl bull, and she had her hair or whatever gone up like that, so she looked like she had horns because she didn't identify as a girl. And this was for preschoolers, 3-year-olds, and they have these animals talking about this. Like,
so why the big push?
Yeah.
Why the big push in school now all of a sudden? Why the big push in Disney? Why the big push in every media and every aspect? And as far as I'm concerned, the big push is because big pharma makes a lot of money.
Yep.
And if you look and you go down and you follow where the money path goes, and you know, you don't have to take what anybody has to say, you could actually go look for yourself. You can go and find out exactly where this money is going, and every kid that makes how much money as they get made on each kid, from the beginning of the puberty blockers all the way into all the medical care and the aftercare, because the aftercare is continuous. When you go from having a penis to a vagina, you are continually having to dilate yourself for the rest of your life. Do these teachers know what kind of medical stuff they're promoting for the end result? It makes me sick. But if you look at the people that are pushing this, and I have looked into it, and one of them is a trans woman. Okay, millions and billions of dollars they have. They fund the universities that make the classes for this, that do the grants for all the studies on this. They also have also made WPATH, which is what do you say? Making the criteria for gender dysphoria. So they're the ones that are in there making that criteria for what gender dysphoria is supposed to be. The doctors are, oh, you got gender dysphoria. Okay, well, we're going to put you on this. Well, you don't understand. Those people also have the pharmaceuticals that are making the drugs for this, that is pushing this. It's going around in a circle. And this is exactly what's happening. And people just think, oh, they care about the LGBT. Do they care? Because if you look at it and you follow the money, that's not what shows out on paper. And they don't really actually care about your kids. They care about how much money your kid can make them. Like even they have the medical surgical equipment that they're making for these surgeries because they make money on those surgical equipment. Like this is a bigger thing. And when you look at it that way, you have a really hard time thinking that it's because they actually care.
Yeah.
Because if they actually care, like, why is there such a big push? Why is there such a big push in every aspect of, like, it is in your face constantly. Like, it doesn't matter what you look on social media. You walk down the street, there's this pride flag, blah, 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 blah. Why is it so prominent? Always follow the money. As far as I'm concerned, always follow the money.
United Nations. I was gonna say United Nations now has a SOG group as of recent.
Interesting.
Yeah. And SOG started out of Vancouver, but yeah, that connections.
And I don't think it's hit all across Canada, has it? It's just more Western provinces, isn't it?
Nope,
like BC and
it's all across Canada.
It just has different names. Like
so Saskatchewan fought this. And so Saskatchewan, I don't think has it in their school. I think Alberta's trying to fight it. I'm not quite sure. I think there's a lot of fronts that are trying to fight this.
Yeah.
I think there's also a lot of people that have no idea what SOGI is and never even heard of it.
No,
they don't even know what's going on in their schools.
No, they don't have time.
Like,
they don't have time
it's very sad.
But we just learned that in this Ministerial Order 33399, the Educational Program Guide, says that any concerns, the responsibility of resources are rests with the boards now. They've moved it from the BC government. So the boards of each community, school boards, are responsible, and any concerns should be dealt with at the district level. And then it says that personal liability, they have the power to remove. They are responsible for evaluating all the books and SOGI materials, each school board, and they have the power to remove them. So if enough parents actually got together and said that, no, we don't want this in our classrooms, the school boards have to listen, because they're elected to look after, it's a democracy supposedly, and they're supposed to look after and do what the citizens in their their community want. And if
Mhm.
they don't want this in the schools, then
They have to abide by
Parents
it.
need to
it should
stand
be
up.
removed, because that is what the BC government's information says, that it's up to individual school boards.
But I find it funny because when you go
Deflect.
to and talk to them and you try to have a conversation with
Yeah.
them, or you try to ask them questions, you're getting referred.
Yeah.
So it makes it very hard. But there's still people fighting for sure.
That's fair, and it's all out there. So, to wrap up this like amazing conversation, I knew we'd be able to hit 2 hours. So Serena, being as the current parent and the most newest, I would say newest parent to compared to the ones that we have, and I just have cats. What would you want to see in the future, especially in such a small town like Port Alberni, for options for education for kids and parents that maybe aren't fully wanting to be a part of what the current offerings are?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm thinking about that like almost on a daily basis because I have a child who's coming up to school age in about, well, he's 3, so a couple of years, and I have another one following. And not only because of my kids, but I care about our community in general. And what I'm seeing is just, um, and the division more than anything, right, is concerning. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would love to see education, like you were talking about earlier, back to basics. Keep politics out. Same with healthcare. Politics out. Like I said, my background with the nursing training, um, this mandate. I haven't gone back to work yet, and I'm waiting.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same thing. It's politics is too much involved in these systems, and people really, it comes down to people taking that responsibility back. I think the parents have to get involved, and like Lisa said, or maybe it was Stacey, I think, mentioned, a lot of people don't know about this yet, the soji stuff. We feel like we should be like waking up like yesterday, right? But there's people are just coming on board now, just starting to open their eyes up to what's going on. And we've put so much trust in these institutions, whether it's healthcare or education, because we came out of a time where that was the way it was, and it was more trustworthy. But what we're seeing is like a fundamental change on a global level. This is like a global agenda from what I can glean from doing research. And this isn't just a Port Alberni issue, but I'm try to be, I should say, I try to be optimist and look at it from an angle of everything happens for a reason. There's always the victims of when things transition and change. I'm hoping that this is a had to happen kind of scenario in order to grow and in order to get to a better place. And I feel just in my heart, it just, so much pain for these children that have been misled and gone through, say, transitions and now regret it. I can't imagine what that would feel like as a parent, or as the person who went through this. And I know that there's been videos coming out of people telling their stories, and it's tremendous. It's almost like you can't even watch it. It's so traumatic. But anyway, by going back to the education, and the symbol of the rainbow as well, right? The rainbow means so many things around the world, and it always has since our stories begin, since as far as we can go back. The Sumerians even have the symbol, and I could get into all this. I feel like this would be a separate maybe conversation because of the time factor, but I'll just say that the rainbow has been like throughout all the stories, often as a symbol of unity, a bridge, peace, harmony, multiplicity, diversity. Um, what else? I said unity. That's the big one. Eternity, opportunity, coexistence. All these words, right? That kind of remind us what we are as not only humans, but as a energetic being, as a magnetic energetic being, right? We live in the greater universe, which you could map out in the electromagnetic spectrum and say, we see a rainbow when the prism diffracts light and all that, right? We see a rainbow, but there's so much more we can't see in around us, right? And if light from our sun contains all the potentials, we see this little circle because it's a complete circle, right, in the sky. We only see the band because Earth gets in the way, but if you see the whole thing, it's a whole circle. And I just feel like as nature in general, as a human, and the nature around us has so much to teach us and to to take the symbol and use it as a symbol of division is not doing justice to nature's teachings and to the spiritual teachings, the greater things that we can't see, right, that are all around and within. And yeah, so I think if our schools want to use this symbol, they've got to give it justice, and I'm not accepting anything lesser. And I intend to be involved in this process, and I know it's a process. I want to fix it now, but it's going to be a long process, and I hope more parents come on board and say, this resonates with me too. I might not be a leader per se in the traditional kind of warrior type role, but I feel like I need to be part of this and collaborate in any way you can in your community, because there are people in every community that are feeling this way, and there are people that are trying to get together and fix this problem. And I just feel like that symbol is so important because it's that central piece that is playing on our subconscious and is being used. I'm going to say used because it's not giving the full story. It's just telling a little snippet. And not to say that LGBTQ people aren't part of that rainbow. They are. And I believe that they've opened up this for us to go through now, and they brought our attention to it. And all these people should be honored too for their contribution to that greater thing, right? And I might not agree or want my child to be in an environment where they could potentially become a victim. Of course, nobody wants that. And I have my own ideas on how I think the education environment should be constructed. And I'll just say, to make it simple, being in nature. But yeah, I could get into this. I feel like a separate educational podcast would be great.
Yes.
But that symbol, I think we need to not feel like it's a negative symbol. We should be able to, if you like wearing symbols, put it on your body and feel good about being part of that, because we're all part of it and we're all part of that unity of life. And the rainbow is just showing us. It's just reminding us what that is. And you could take the story of Christianity, break it down. You could take the story with Hinduism, Indra is a character. You can take all these different people through time that have been leaders in the spiritual world and say, they had a rainbow around their head or around their body. Why? Shouldn't we learn about the physics of how a rainbow is? Why do we see a rainbow? What's the physics of our eyes? What's going on? What's the physics of a prism? Of sunlight going through rain. Can anybody describe that graduating high school? Like, does anybody know what the rainbow is and why? So that's my big question. If I could ask somebody on the other side, which I don't really believe in, but this divided sides, if I could ask, that would be like, let's talk about this symbol, because if you really believe in it, let's have a conversation about what that means, and not just tell people what it means, include people in that conversation.
Yes.
So anyway, I'll leave it at that. My baby's waking up, so she's gonna start to.
And I think you're bang on, where it's a lot of people are coming to that, where they just aren't feeling comfortable with the things that are being taught, like you said, and using rainbows as one of them, where it's like most people are going to grow up to believe that that is associated with pride in that community, where it's actually, if you open that up and step back, you actually see that all religions, all cultures, whether that's spirituality or a religion, goes back to that, which then understanding means everything, everybody under umbrella and inclusivity, but is being used very divisively. And like you said, for me, even personally, when I see that somewhere now, I'm like, is that a kid that just likes a lot of colors, or am I going to have to be careful what I say around here? You know what I mean? And it's just kind of like shitty, because that's not what that intention is. And, and there's lots, the symbolism, we talk about that when it comes to like pedophilia and all that. And, there are lots of stuff that is driven by that, but people are so busy. They're so broke. They're so stressed out. They're so fucking trying to keep up with the Joneses and be a Pinterest mom and do all these things and educate yourself. And you never feel like you're doing enough, that everyone's just overloaded. And they're just like, fuck it. I'm not looking into anything. I don't care. YOLO. And that is by, in my opinion, design on so many different levels. So I think conversations like these are so important, because then they start bringing awareness to your life and how does that affect you? If you don't care, that's great. Carry on living your lives. But if you're a parent that are like, I don't know that I like this, then you should be able to have a space to come and talk about it and try to understand. I feel like I'm less defensive when I understand. I'm less mad about something when I understand it more. I've come full circle. At first I was like, what the fuck is this? This is so stupid, to being like, it's really not my business what people do in their own, like in their own privacy. I just don't want this, in schools kind of thing, right? So we all have to understand that we're not going to be perfect. We're not going to get it. There is some stories inside of us that probably bring out some narratives that maybe don't bring the best forward with us, but that doesn't mean every single person that's questioning this is a homophobic person or doesn't want trans people to exist or believe that they should die. That is so further from that. It's, why can't we have an honest conversation? And the minute we can't have an honest conversation, there's a flag to me personally. That means that there's some nefarious, whether that's the whole thing or someone is jumping in on it, and that deserves some questions. And we all learned that with COVID, right? I think teachers are going through exactly what nurses went through for a couple years where, they were chastised for saying anything and how dare you put people at harm. And there's all these risks by saying, don't take the vaccine. Well, guys, I'm not saying that everybody's right, because I really hate that they're like, we got this conspiracy right, so we're right about everyone. But that's what was happening. It's like, oh, well, we would know about this if nurses and doctors were saying it. Well, they were being fucking silenced. So who's to say, and we're saying this right now, that's the same thing going on. So to say that teachers are for it isn't necessarily saying that they're for it and support it by seeing what they see in their experiences. It's that there's a good chance that they'll lose their job, their passion, and that supersedes everything else because they want to help kids. They're actually there and they're being told this is how it's going to help kids, just like nurses are taught, and doctors and all the medical that, vaccines are the be all end all and that's everything. And that's why you can't argue them, right? Because that is what they're being taught.
Well, and it was our autonomy.
And it's a lot now too.
Yeah. Right.
Well, I can say that quite honestly, it sucks for them, and it's an awful spot for them because now getting into that, people are starting to get together and make homeschooling pods now.
Yeah, and pods.
So
exactly.
People are now like, okay, if you're not going to talk to us, if you're not going to have that open conversation, if we can't work together to try and make things better for the kids, then I guess we'll take what you say is, if you don't like it, go homeschool. And there is so much of a collective right now for people to now go and make homeschooling a priority. It's, I hear it from everywhere. And so the teachers, unfortunately, you are going to lose your jobs because there isn't going to be kids to teach.
Yeah.
So you're one or the other. Like I'm not trying to be threatening at all. No. I'm trying to say the reality is if you don't stand up for one, you're screwed either way. Like, so stand with your heart. Stand with your heart. If you don't feel like it's right, then stand up, because honestly, there are so many people behind you, and I don't think they even understand how many people are behind them. Like, you have teachers saying from the marches that they were actually, because of the way the unions were talking, they were actually scared to even come out to their cars. Because they thought something was going to happen to them.
We're so dangerous.
Because we're so and I thought, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like,
Mom, I love you, but I've never seen you as a fighter in your old age.
Why would the unions and the teachers things even say things like that to put fear into those poor teachers? And so now they're getting fear from that side. They're getting fear of losing their jobs, their pensions, everything else. But unfortunately, that is just going to make you lose your job anyway. So you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I feel really bad for teachers. I just think it's insane.
It's an opportunity, like Serena said. There's lots of things wrong with these systems of old. They started out with real good intentions and things were going really, really good, but greed and human nature just takes over, and there we are now. So it's a time where it's either you're going to stay with the old and probably watch it crumble over the next decade, or you're going to be a part of the new and building something new. So then, you know what? There's something for everybody. If you can't do it, like, there's so many people that say you can't homeschool, and I get that. So these pods are amazing where you're seeing parents are just putting one day a week and they're taking 10 kids and they're teaching them that day, and another parent takes over. Like, there are options for, people that financially can't do it. And there's a lot of interest. It's kind of gone for that meme where like homeschool kids were the weird kids to now being that is the privilege and the beauty. If we adopt a child, I told Grant that is what I would like to do. If I can't do it, we will be having mom come up here and do it for us. If I have to work, you know what I mean? Like, and there's communities out there just, sorry, Elisa, you're just learning this now. It's a surprise.
You might have to come back to Port Alberni to get into her class.
No.
Yes. See, there you go.
But like, and that's where I think what we can maybe end it off is that like, you don't need to be afraid because there are solutions that are coming up, but you need to get involved, whether that be in the school boards, whether that being a pod or homeschooling. And you know what, if you're a parent that can't do that, we've talked about this before in our homeschooling episode, I think it was like season 3 or 4, is that take those opportunities outside of school then to teach your kids stuff that they're not. Take them to the grocery store and get them to talk to the grocery store person. Get them to, like, mom used to always make me fucking call for pizza or order my food. It was those types of things that are super annoying, but they're not being taught that in school. So they go out as adults and they like can't even talk to the fucking waitress. And you're like a waitress and you're like, okay, kid, what do you want? Like, fucking Christ, I got to do my job, and they're not, again, contributing members of society because they've never been forced to, never been told that they have to do these things, right? So if you can't, you have lots of opportunities to learn, to teach your kids outside of school if you can't, right? Or finding these pods or things like that. So there's lots coming up. I think this
Well,
is that time.
there's a really cool thing, and Stacy had this idea, and it's something that I thought about too, is that, do you know how many older people, grandparents, do you know how many people have from this pandemic lost their families over the divide?
Yeah.
And they're very alone, and there's a lot of alone people right now that I'm sure would love a purpose and a purpose to teach the children, and all these older people that are getting of a quite higher age. We're losing their knowledge.
Yeah.
We need their knowledge. We need that from them, and then the kids can give them what it was like to be a kid, and they can look at them and go, see the preciousness and the innocence in it, and get the kid back in their own selves. Like, there's so many opportunities to bridge that gap in that side, and then the other stuff can fight themselves out if they feel like it. But I feel like there's a lot of opportunity in that, and there's actually a lot of people starting to look into that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's great.
And if you want to look into information on Soji, there's
Yes.
a site called exposingsoji.com.
Okay.
Ton of information.
Amazing. Well,
Yeah,
it'll
That's
tell
just
you.
one.
Yeah.
It'll
And
tell
that's
you
what we
all
want people
about
to do, is research for themselves and what looks good. And if that feels good to you, I'm not going to judge. I don't know. I'm not a parent. I don't meet your kids, you live with them. So you decide. But as long as parents are educated and they know and they can make informed consent, right? So they aren't so confused when their kids come home and bring this in front of them and they're like, what? And they react poorly, like, wouldn't it be better for parents to be educated and get to tell that to their kids? So if their kids come home saying that, they know how to handle it. Maybe less rage and anger would come out if there was more inclusion with the parents of having these conversations, instead of they're having these whole conversations and ideas created and narratives, and then they're bringing them home. And then of course parents are fighting because they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And then all of a sudden now that's not a safe space to come home and talk about it, where it's like, well, you're not even involving the parents to begin with. So naturally they're going to get triggered when they don't know what this means. And at the same time, you could look at the right side that does have that extreme of like, every single person in that community is a predator. No, they're not, right? So like, as us, as these people that are kind of pushing for more of this, we also have to hold our side accountable to being like, stop fucking saying that. Not every single person is that, like, we have to also be doing that now, which I think some of us are really good at doing, and being like, no, that's not the same thing. We're not the people that don't think that they should exist. We're just saying politics in all ways. This one just seems to be the hypest one right now, out of school. And we're saying that because we've seen what happened with COVID and the vaccines as well, and how much that destroyed our kids by the division and the rhetorics and the politicalness that kids were bringing into classrooms. Same fucking thing, just a different industry, right? So,
and teachers have so much power. You think of little kids going into the schools, teachers are like gods.
They are.
If a teacher had told me that the sky was green, I would have gone home and told my mom, sky's green. And if she had said no, I would have said, you're wrong. The teacher told me, because that's where I'm going to learn everything. And you're dumb. And they've brought in programs like that, core math. I couldn't help with that.
Yeah.
I didn't understand it. What did that do? It made me look like an idiot that couldn't do like grade 3 math or 4. I don't remember the grade. It's so long ago. But I couldn't help because it was so off. So it made me look like an idiot, and made to my child, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't even do their work. It was pitting. It was horrible to do that. So
Yeah.
They have power. Those teachers have so much power with those
They
children.
do. Yeah. And then equally so are like completely trapped at the same time. It's such I can't, like you said, it's a glass case of emotion of like what they have to deal with. But at the end of the day, parents just need to look into it. And if you're comfortable with it, then fine. But if you're not, then I would suggest getting involved as best as you can, school boards, find the communities that you have around you, talk to parents, talk to each other, be graceful with each other, be kind to each other, be open to conversation, and stop coming in with bias on both sides. Come at it just like completely open, and I'm going to take your side, you hear my side. Let's see how we can come together for the common good for the children. Literally, that's the whole point, right? Take our egos out of it of which side is right, what's best for everybody. Politics out of school.
Well,
This
you know
is
what?
part of politics, in my opinion.
Children don't have sides.
No, they
Children
don't.
don't have sides. Parents have sides.
Yeah.
Teachers have sides. Those are the people that have sides.
Yeah.
So now you're watching kids, duke it out with each other in the school system, at school, and bullying each other and doing whatever because of the parent sides.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be in school. It should not be in school.
Yeah. And parents too, that's warning too. Like make sure, like it's great to be friends with your kids, but at the same time, what are you teaching them that may have them go out there saying stuff and being divisive themselves, whether you unintentionally know that or not, right? Like the only one I'm fine with is everyone saying fuck Trudeau. That's fine. Teach your kids that 100%.
I think they all do.
That's the only one we can all agree with, right? But we can carry on forever. So obviously we're going to have a part 2 when we go into season 7. But thank you guys so much for joining me today and talking to me about this. I really love that everyone's kind of coming in at a different place where it's like, Mom, you've, watched the things with my brothers, Stacey, you've been in the women's shelter kind of, that part of it. Serena, you've been, a new mom and also in the nursing thing. So it's great to see everyone coming together with the same ideas of like, this has nothing to do with hate, just warning, just talk and open conversation. Let's please have some so we can come together, because this secrecy and this tight knit is not doing good for anybody, just for protection. It's not protecting anybody. It's actually hurting people, because then the stories and narratives that people aren't involved, those kind of get confirmed, right? Because there's no way to disprove that when you're not showing these people what's actually going on. So then all these stories happen, and it's like without proof that they're not happening, most people are going to believe that bad things are happening, and maybe they're not, maybe they are, but you shouldn't be able to hide anything, So
yeah.
Guys, thank you so much.
You should be able to find out for yourself. You shouldn't have to just listen to one side or the other side. You should be able to find out and be able to go to your own school that you pay taxes for and find out for yourself about anything that you need to find out about your child.
Exactly. And if they're not, and there's pushback, maybe there's some things to be like, maybe this isn't for me, and you need to start looking at it, or at least, like I said, understanding what they're learning so you can then teach them whatever you need to teach them on the outside. But getting involved and not hating each other as parents, I think, is the number one important thing I want people to come away from this, is that no one is hating, no one is nothing. It's open conversations that we should be able to have as adults. And if you feel so strongly about it, you should be able to show up and as an adult professionally have discourse about that, and just still sit in that, like, let's agree to disagree, and not like fuck you, hate, and screaming each other and building these false narratives, because it's not doing anybody a favor on any side. It's not protecting any children. It's teaching them more divisiveness, in my opinion. So thank you guys so much for the last 2 hours. I appreciate all that you guys are doing. Keep doing it. Keep going. Keep doing all the boards. Keep educating people. It will pay off one day. And I can't wait to have you guys back on again and see where this is in the next, 6 months of you guys advocating for kids and education. So thank you guys. Thanks everyone that's listening.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you guys for stopping by the show today. We appreciate you so much. If you like this episode and you want to hear more, make sure to show us some love on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest page, the Be Real Babe Podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube and Rumble channels, like those episodes, and turn on the notification bells. You can find our video version of the show on YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify, or you can catch the audio version on Apple and Google Podcast. But stay tuned for more realness coming to you soon. Until next time, babes.